Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. We will have a moment of silence and then pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good morning. We thank all of you for being here this morning. We have a full agenda, so we're going to get right to it. Mrs. Kathy Smith, public input.
The hot seat again.
Yes, and if I could make an announcement, please. Anyone that's speaking to the group, if you would please sit at the table. Our camera above us is not working yet, so we need you to sit there so we can properly record you. Good morning.
Hi, morning, everyone. Happy Teacher Appreciation Week, which is one reason why I wanted to come and speak today, because many teachers, of course, were not reappointed. We know that not everybody needs to be reappointed, but we had many of them. But in my looking into our numbers that I have found anyway, we had a third of our people that were here less than 6 months. I don't know about you, but I know that costs money. And I would rather put that money into mentoring. I know I have talked about it before with we need to retain our teachers. And I think it would be best to try to get teachers to stay here and retain. We have had many teachers that have called us, talked to us at work sites, members and non-members that weren't reappointed. And most of them all had, that was my phone, sorry, I silenced it here. But most of them have said they have had effective evaluations, if not some of them actually highly effective evaluations on their IPS scores, and they're not being hired back. Of course, the main thing is we're not a good fit. I understand that. But many of them have also asked, well, why aren't you reappointing me? Let me know how what I can do to help. And we have some administrators that will not tell them why. They continue to just say they're not a good fit. I wish they would tell them why, because there needs to be a reason, I would think, at that point. Because we all need to learn. We understand that. Everybody can learn. We still continue to learn. That's why we have to go back and keep going back to school all the time. But we do need to understand that there are ways that we can help teachers also, because we need to keep our teachers. They're going away and they are leaving. So we need to figure out a way that we can help them also. So thank you.
Thank you. We thank you for your very timely comments. Mr. Yoakum. Good morning.
Good morning. This is a general comment. I have one item I'm going to talk about later, tab 304, but for this, I just want to talk in general about the Internal Audit Committee. We had what I believe to be our last meeting on the 30th of this last month. I saw the policy changes that you have recommended, and amazingly, you want your members to be on there, but you removed the 20 skills that are required for being an auditor, which I would think was funny, because we had a hard time even keeping up with that list. So, but I encourage you to come up with some new solutions. And the big thing is that the audit function needs your support. Like on this audit, on this agenda, we have 3 audits that were done back in October and did not get before you until now. So I think that it would help to have somebody that is appointed that is a champion for them, because under the most recent changes, there was no board liaison coming to our committee meeting. So I just want to say that. So because of that, I think I will send a resignation letter to Mr. Dodd at the end of today. There's no need for me, I believe that unless you change that. That also gives you option then, you could reinstate the committee and just not have me there. And I'll give you input in a few minutes on tab 304. But I appreciate Mr. Dodd's appointing me to that, and maybe the rest of you don't, but depending on what I say about a particular audit, but it's been an adventure. I turn 80 years old this August, so I think it's about time that maybe you get somebody a little younger on there to give you advice. And so with that, thanks.
Vance, thank you very much for your service.
You know, Mr. Yocum, things will not be the same if you depart. So we certainly do appreciate you, and happy early birthday.
I have no doubt, even without an audit committee necessarily in place, and just having a more direct relationship between our auditor and the board, we have plenty of watchdogs, so to speak, out there, and I trust that you will not be able to stay very far away. And I valued your input, and even in the absence of a committee, don't be afraid. Pick up that phone and give me a call. I'm going after the court system. All right, even better. Thank you. Now the school district has solved every problem, he can move on. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your service. Item 3.01 has been pulled today, so we're going to move on to 3.02, which is an overview of the Lincoln Park Educational Center. Dr. Portia Byfield. Mr. Williams, are you going to? Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman, Mrs. Cunningham, board members, Superintendent Cornegie. Good morning to you. I feel very fortunate to be able to talk to you and provide you with an overview of something as exciting as the Lincoln Park Education Center coming into Claremont. So today I want to provide you with an overview. Myself and the principal, Mr. Williams, will be here to share with you. We're prepared to answer as many of your questions as you may have. If we don't have an answer for you today, we will find it and get back to you, I promise. I assure you for that. So the clicker doesn't work, so maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. There we go. Thank you. So as you know, that students sometimes becomes disengaged with the traditional school model and would love to have an opportunity to be in a setting that best suits their own individual need. So Lincoln Park Education Center combines time and opportunity to meet the needs of those students. So when you think about your students who are working in full-time jobs, students who have responsibilities outside of school, and students who just don't get what they need in the traditional education setting, Lincoln Park serves as that model for them. So today I want to share with you what the Lincoln Park High School Education Program will offer. So students will have the opportunity to earn the 18-credit diploma option. When you think about your students who have jobs outside of school, who have to leave early or work late when they come to school in the morning, they are not at their best. And as a result, they don't get the full benefit of the school setting. So having the option of having an 18-credit diploma option and having a alternative high school experience and being in a schedule like a double shift model school, you can choose to be there in the morning or you can choose to be in the afternoon, whatever best meets your need as a student. And then the support of having Lake Tech and Lake Sumter State College providing that opportunity for dual enrollment. So it's a win-win situation for the students in that model. As you can see here, I know the superintendent shared this slide with you about sometime in December, I believe December 4th, sharing some of the things that Lake Tech will be offering. And I just want to bring that slide back to you so you can see as we talk about how the program at the high school will help to integrate with that. So when you think about the programs that Lake Tech will be offering to serve the needs of the community at large, but thinking about it from the perspective of our students, what they will be able to get get there as well when they do dual enroll. So they can earn a career through a certificate program while they're earning their high school diploma. And the good part about the dual enrollment and working towards an 18-credit diploma option is that students get to get 4 electives, and they can get their 4 electives through Lake Sumter State College or through Lake Technical College. And here again are some of the programs that Lake Sumter will be offering, leading to degrees as well. So really, it works out to be a win-win situation for the students. So as I mentioned before, the Lincoln Park is a double shift model. So what the double shift model is that you have one group of student that attends in the morning and another group of student attends in the afternoon. This model allows for greater flexibility when it comes to scheduling in terms of the needs of the student. Then one of the other benefits of Lincoln Park is we talk about the dual enrollment and students being able to have a job, but what a win-win situation it is for you to have a job, earning money, but earning credit through cooperative education training, what we famously call OJT. So for the student, that is also a win-win. Then, of course, we know that Lincoln Park is a school that will operate Monday through Thursday, where Friday is, even though it is not a mandatory student day, it is a day that serves to meet the needs of student in a one-on-one basis. So student, think about your college days. In your college days, remember your professor has office hours and you go meet with your professor to talk about different things. Well, teachers will be able to meet with their students and provide those individualized support that they need. And that's part of the reason why students who will attend Lincoln Park will have personalized education plan so they can have all their needs met to accomplish their goal of earning their diploma or become dual enroll and earn credits or a career in their field of their choice. Do we have any questions so far?
Brilliant.
I could add to that if
Yes.
you don't mind. Back a few months ago, Lake Technical College received the Workforce Development Capitalization Incentive Grant from the Florida Department of Education. It's about $4 million, and they've just hired the architect, and so their first project is the gym that's there. It's going to house an innovative classroom space for HVAC, the electrical career certificate, and in partnership with Lake Sumter State College, the mechatronics and construction management. So it's going to be a movable wall space. It's very innovative. We're super excited about that. And so they'll be starting that renovation here very soon, thanks to that funding. And then the state has released another set of incentive grants that they will be applying for in July to continue to expand the project. So that one's well underway. So just wanted to give you an update on that one.
How does the time work? So I know we have a certain amount of instructional minutes, and I know it's an 18-credit diploma, so is that negated because of the
Yes.
credit hours?
It is. So students will be there. So they will be right at the 900 minutes,
Okay.
which is what is required for credit. So they'll be right there.
Okay,
Yes.
on Monday through Thursday,
Monday
because the
through
Friday
Thursday.
they don't have to come.
Right,
Okay.
Monday through Thursday, yes. So as you can see, we are revolutionizing high school education, right? We are combining flexibility with partnership, strategic partnership. So we start in August with our morning shift, which is our first phase. So our model for the morning shift will start with 4 core teachers, an ESC teacher. Then, of course, you have your principal. Then you have a data clerk and ESC clerk position combined. Then you have your bookkeeper and school secretary. And of course, an ESC teacher will be part of that as well. So we start with that.
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yes.
Is the ESC teacher in addition to the 4 core?
In addition to the 4 core, yes. So with those positions at Lincoln Park is always going to be based on student enrollment. And teachers at Lincoln Park will certainly work within the guidelines of their agreement, certainly. And as student enrollment grows and the evening shift evolves, Mr. Williams will work with the Human Resources Department along with LCEA to determine how to best meet the needs of the teachers and students at Lincoln Park. So it's a unique model that requires flexibility and will take time to evolve into the vision that was set forth for Lincoln Park.
Have we started enrolling kids, or do we have like a waiting list or a interest list, or where are we on the initial?
Yes, so far we have 31 students enrolled. On May 13th will be the official enrollment at the Old Claremont Elementary School. Their parents will have the opportunity to meet with Mr. Williams, ask as many questions, and determine if Lincoln Park is going to be the best fit for their own educational needs. So that will be on the 13th.
Thank you.
Is there who does the enrollment? Is there a guidance counselor?
Not yet, but we will have one. We will be doing the enrollment. We'll start that process as,
So
and
you
as,
and Mr. Williams are
yes.
doing the enrollment?
Well, more so Mr. Williams will be doing the enrollment.
okay.
I'll be there to support him, right?
Gotcha.
I'll
Okay.
provide mental support. How about that, right?
Ideally, how many kids are you striving for in that program?
Ideally, the capacity would be about 160 students.
Okay.
Now, it may not necessarily divide evenly between evening shift and morning shift. It's going to be based solely on those individual student needs, the shift that they're going to choose. Yeah. So we start in August, and as it evolves and as student enrollment increases, so will the staffing at Lincoln Park. And as I mentioned before, Mr. Williams will work in partnership with, of course, Human Resources and LCA to meet those needs of students as well as teachers. So here I have on these slides, their guidelines, and they're simply that, guidelines. These guidelines only serve as a framework to ensure that we target the students that we feel would benefit the most from this opportunity. So, of course, we know students who have jobs, students who have responsibilities outside of school, maybe care for elderly parents or younger siblings. And then, of course, you have students who travel on traveling teams who, when you think about it, maybe the virtual model does not necessarily work for them. This would be an ideal opportunity for such a student. And then, of course, you think about your student who has been retained multiple times and just needs to be in that smaller setting, getting exactly what they need so that they can graduate and move on to the next big thing in their life. And then, of course, you think about the student who's been in an alternative setting. So think about a student who went to, say, Lake Success and has enormous success there and just benefits from that small size. That would be an ideal setting as well. And then, of course, your student who just wants to enter the workforce quickly, that would be ideal. Now, these are just guidelines, and these guidelines only serve as framework to identify students. Of course, there are diverse needs and diverse circumstances that the principal will have the opportunity to look at to make sure that students at Lincoln Park caters to a wide, diverse need of student needs and programs. Do we have any questions so far?
When you say, like, a student that's on an athletic team, I picture they miss a day or two.
Yeah.
So will there be an opportunity for a student that's enrolled in the morning to come in the afternoon as well?
Yes.
Where they're doubling up that day to make up the Monday, Tuesday that they missed, or?
Absolutely. That's the whole idea of having that academic plan, because you get to sit and map out their circumstances and their needs to make sure that they get what they need. Yeah. And so, of course, we recognize that Lincoln Park is not centrally located. It's on the south side of the county. But any student who wants to go there and who will benefit from the opportunity has that. There will be school bus, which will be district provided. All students will have IDs, which will allow them to ride public transportation for free. And of course, parent pickup and drop off. And then there'll be ample parking for student drivers. It is a small school, so there is not a full-service cafeteria. So as of right now, it is slated to go from Aurelia Cole Academy, but that could change as well as it evolves. So is there any questions that you have for me at this time?
This is very exciting.
It is.
Will a student potentially lose their place there if there's a behavior concern?
Well, the same rules that apply to any student in Lake County schools when it comes to behavior will apply to the student at Lincoln Park as well.
I assume the code of conduct would
Yeah.
cover them, but if they get into trouble, is this a benefit that gets taken away, or it'll be treated just like a normal school?
Just like a normal school, yes, because it is, and that's their school, so.
I know, I get that. It was just
Yeah.
more of like if you have a choice or you have some needs that are being met, and
Yeah.
it does seem a little bit like a privilege to do this school,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's just interesting.
Yeah,
It is a great idea.
thank you. Mr. Dad, I saw you had a question.
Well, yeah, I mean, I love the concept. I'm wondering about the enrollment. You know, I thought by now that more than 31 students would be jumping out the opportunity to do something truly unique like this.
Yeah. Well, we've been marketing.
Uh-huh.
We've met with the principals. He recently met with the school counselors. So now we're in the thick of it. So May 31st and all summer, the goal will be to try to get to capacity so we can have,
Okay.
yeah.
The goal for this fall is
The-
160?
The goal would be, it's an ambitious goal, but we do want the school to be populated, so.
That way you could have the morning and evening session
Yeah.
in its debut year, which is really
Yeah.
one of the big
Yeah,
you know,
highlights of it.
highlights of
Yeah,
of this unique
absolutely.
program. And-
Yeah.
And you don't want just 8 kids in a class,
No.
right? So, I mean, it's just
No.
hard to think about from
Yeah.
a cost standpoint for a
Yeah.
student, what that would be
Yeah.
versus,
Yeah.
you know, if the school were at capacity. So-
Absolutely, I agree.
And to be clear, it's 160 over the total day, so roughly 80 in the morning and 80 in the evening.
It could be, but it's just going to be based on student needs, because
Sure.
maybe 90 kids want to be in the
Sure,
morning shift.
but
so-
160 for the total day.
Yeah.
No, it's split. Okay.
Why did you decide to open the morning first?
Just a gradual, so we can see what enrollment is going to look like. And then, of course, you know, you don't want to have a staff of a certain number of people, and then you have student enrollment, it does not mirror the need for that. So it has to be a gradual process, and like I mentioned, you know, working with human resources as enrollment and hitting the pavement, making sure we have our enrollment numbers where it needs to be. It's a great opportunity, and I see, as the word gets out, I can see a lot of students wanting to take advantage of that, especially having to not be at school all day and being able to work, and students who work part-time who may want to go full-time. So I anticipate that going to.
So how are we getting the word out?
We are meeting with the guidance counselors, which he did last week, met with the school principals. We have an enrollment opportunity, because starting next week, it is posted on social media, so we're getting the word out that way. Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful idea. I wholeheartedly support it. I do have a concern. I'm a little concerned about the enrollment process and the fact that there is no guidance counselor.
Yeah.
I mean, we are doing a lot of incentive things to get people to be interested.
Yeah.
So what happens if they want to enroll? We don't have or maybe I missed that part. We don't have a person that is there to take care of that, do we?
Well, not yet, but I'm certainly, after we're finished here today, right, Mr. Farnsworth, we can look into maybe having that position posted and possibly hiring someone
Okay.
as soon as
And your
possible.
enrollment date is May 13th?
May 13th,
So
yeah.
it's going to be really difficult to have that
Very
person on
tight.
board by May 13th.
Yeah, very tight. But I do know you do have some prospective people who have been inquiring about the position, so hopefully we can get someone on board. If-
Yeah, I would just hate to see us
Mm-hmm.
not be able to develop the full potential of the school, because in the beginning, we haven't done the things we need to do to make
Sure.
it such that we have the children.
Yeah.
You know, Mr. Dodd has a point. 31 is a little low if our goal is 90 or 160.
Yeah, we certainly can work on getting that word out and putting the, you know, the pavement and getting a counselor out. So we'll just get that advertised as soon as possible and look at some of the prospective ones that we are aware of and making that offer and having that as well,
Okay.
yeah.
The lunch situation, sorry.
It's okay.
Concerns me a little bit too, because if you're satelliting from another place and you've got 90 kids, breakfast and lunch, that's quite a bit. So are we at a point where the only thing that would be necessary to get lunch at the school up and going would be to hire people? I mean, are the facilities there?
The facilities are under construction now, so it's not ready yet, and there will be kind of a miniature cafeteria. I don't know if you've ever been to South Lake High School, and they have the patio, and then there's a window, and they serve. It's going to be something similar on the interior, and about the size of Lake Success Academy. So it'll be served from there,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I think it's a wonderful idea. Anyone else?
And wasn't part of the plan to eventually for Lake Tech to prepare some of the food, probably in a later phase and part of the culinary program or something else?
Yeah, I
too?
was actually
Yeah.
going to mention that. So this next round of funding, they're hoping that that will be one of the projects that they will write into that grant. So in the page of some of their offerings, they're going to start with the bakery piece.
Community bakery.
And they're hoping to open kind of a community coffee shop
Yep.
as a central hub to be able to bring people in. The students will be able to take advantage of that as well.
Yes.
And then there is a kitchen there. We've left all the equipment there so that once they can get the culinary program up and running,
Yeah.
then the students will be able to take
Student will
advantage
be
of
able
that
to
as
take
well. So,
advantage. But in the meantime, we're going to
Yeah.
still feed them, right?
Sure.
Mr. Mathias?
So we have our night school now for kids. Is there any thought of consolidating that and letting those kids have this opportunity? Or,
Well, I can tell you that the high school principals, they would not want to lose that night school program.
Yes.
They're having tremendous success with that. But I do think that some of those students that they might be serving in the night school program,
Would
this
then-
might be a better option for them
Yes.
because of the dual enrollment opportunities.
Yes.
So they're certainly looking at the needs of all those students.
Yes.
And as I said, they've been meeting with the principals and they've been identifying students and having conversations. So
Yeah.
the first meeting that Mr. Williams had was about 2 months ago, and there was 80 people there that came to the very first
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah.
So that we know that there's growing interest. It's one of those things is you go first.
Yes.
Type idea. And I do think that once they see the presence of Lake Tech and Lake Sumter there, especially once that gym gets completed, you're going to start seeing a lot of attention.
Yes.
We've also have office spaces there for Career Source as well as Leads. And Mr. Brandyburg sits
Yeah.
on that board as well. So there's lots of interest. It's a matter of just getting the facility pieces
Yeah.
completed. So it is a work in progress.
It is, it's
We're kind of
evolving.
opening in August to meet the
Yeah.
high school needs. But
Yes.
I think over the course of the year, you'll see that
Yes.
begin to expand as it really takes off and gets a lot more attention.
Yeah.
So I'm not concerned about the 31.
Me
I do
neither.
think that just even after the brief time that we've had this open window, that's a, Mr. Williams keeps saying, we'll have at least that 80.
Yes, we will.
Here before too
Yeah,
long. And I
I
do
believe.
believe they'll reach that
Yeah.
goal because the high schools have already started to identify students. And there is a plan for a guidance counselor. That was the purpose of today. We have not rolled out those allocations. They're lagging a bit as we're putting the final pieces together, but we wanted to get this in front of you so that we can get approval for those allocations and get them posted,
Yeah.
so.
And the double shift model, it's a new model, it's a new way of thinking I think the community at large has to kind of learn to wrap their head around what that is, because it's not a popular thing that you see in education. It's really a new model for us here in Lake County. So when you say double shift, they're going, double shift, I'm not sure exactly what that means or how that works. So I think it will take some time as well for people to say, okay, now I understand what a double shift school is and how that's going to work and meet my need.
does the modified graduation, how does that affect our graduation rate, if at all?
It won't. There'll be
It will be a
standard
school.
diploma, regular.
Yeah. Standard diploma like everybody else. We'll get a standard, and the school will have a school improvement rating like everybody else, yeah.
Those 31 kids, are they all basically rising ninth graders or kind of?
A combination,
Combination
yeah,
other
of all
grades?
grades, yes.
Kids who have already been working on an 18-credit diploma.
Some of them aren't regular 24 credits. And there's also students expressing interest from other schools outside of our school system as well, because it's just such a unique experience or a unique model.
Yeah, yeah.
You mean from outside the district?
Yes.
Truly unique. At some point, I'd be really interested in learning more about the details of how this works, that
Yes.
how do you get, let's say, one core teacher who might be social studies who can now teach your world history, your U.S. history, and econ, government, we've got so many various required courses, or your science teacher, is this person teaching biology plus a multitude of other science courses?
So the teacher will.
How's this working?
So it'll be the 4 core and it will be your tested core areas. So if you're an algebra teacher, you're teaching algebra and geometry if you're a math teacher. If you're a science teacher, you'll be teaching biology and probably environmental because that kind of helps supports the success on biology. And then, of course, U.S. history and ELA 1 or 2. And it will be blended, so some classes will be online as well.
Okay.
So think about how Lake Success work. It works kind of like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Ms. Luke, anything?
No, I'm good, thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Williams, you have anything you want to share with us? No?
Nope. I think
Well,
she
we
said it
cer-
all.
Okay.
Well,
Dr., go ahead.
Thank you for your time.
We appreciate the great presentation. I think you heard, you have all of our support, and we're looking
Thank you.
forward to seeing it be a great success.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Y'all have a great
If you're
day.
in the area, there's a lot of dirt being moved, and the buildings are gutted.
Yes.
So stop by and look at the
Yes.
progress. It's coming along nicely.
Yes.
And you can see the photos here.
Okay.
Those were fairly new, and it's certainly going to, it's
The board
looking
would
good.
very much appreciate an opportunity to see the facility.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
You too.
Okay. Lake Minneola Addition Construction Closeout Audit. Mr. Ma.
Good morning, Board.
Morning.
I had Mr. Broling coming in at 10:30. I didn't realize item number 1 was going to be striked from
So do
the
you want to
agenda.
do some of your others first?
Correct. Yeah, that's what I'm going to ask, is
Okay.
just if we can change the order. And then when Mr. Broling comes in at the end of whatever report we're
Okay.
presenting, then I'll let him come, because he's on the clock.
Okay. So do you mind if we start with the Wellness Center audit?
Actually, I wanted to start with Elena, our intern.
Which one is that?
That is the 305, the Title IX audit.
Okay.
If that's fine with the school board. And then we'll just go from there down. But if Mr. Burling comes in, we'll just finish up where we're at and let him do his
Okay.
first two.
May I ask, let's do this.
Yes.
Let's do the compliance audit, and then if he's here, then we'll go with him. If not, let's do the wellness audit, because we have a card on that one, and then we'll go back and
Yeah,
finish
he
up.
has the Lake Minneola construction audit.
Right.
And he has the wellness
Okay.
audit as well.
Then I'm sorry, Mr. Yocum, can you stay? Okay, all right.
Okay, sorry. But if you want to switch the order once he's here.
No, that's fine, as long as the audience member can stay, we're
Okay.
good.
Okay. Well, I would like, I know some of you have met Elena Price. She has been the intern for 15 weeks with the Internal Audit Department. I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Tracy, and she hand-selected Elena for this project, or I guess it's actually a course, right? And she earned 3 credits for doing that at school. But just quickly saying that I had an absolutely great time doing this with Lake Sumter, and I encourage, since I'm obviously leaving in a month and a half, I encourage the school board to encourage the new Director of Internal Audit to continue forward with this, because they've asked if we're going to. And I said, obviously, it's up to the school board to do that. But with that, I'm just going to turn this over to Elena. She did a terrific job, and she already presented this to the audit committee, did a great job there. So I'm just going to turn it over to her and let her present it to you as well. Here's your clicker.
So just a brief overview of what the audit is about. We did a Title IX audit report going over Lake Minneola High School and Umatilla High School, reviewing their athletic programs, ensuring that between both schools that they were being equitable between the distribution of resources between their athletic programs for the females and the male sports. So, and we hope for the end goal after this audit report is that they're able to use the information that we have given them to kind of have a template for their own self-audits coming up in the next couple of years to make sure they're still being in compliance with any procedures or any guidelines that they have. And also, this audit is to help promote the schools to making sure they're being accountable of how they're doing their resources and to have open transparency with the students and everyone in the schools. Okay. And then for some background, Mr. Mock actually made this acronym, Playing Fair. It basically just goes over kind of a lot of the key compliance areas that we were looking for throughout the audit, ensuring that they had protective equipment, the locker rooms and facilities were all up to date, allocations, which is like really just the travel benefits and the transportation provided, years of experience within the coaching, institutional housing and facilities, nature of publicity and marketing, game and practice times were all being equitable between the students, and then facilities and access are all equal for all the students to have the same benefits and medical services, academic tutoring services for student athletes, institutional support services for athletic programs, and recruiting resources provided for athletic programs. So those are all the key compliance areas that we went through for the students to make sure they all receive a chance at being the best athlete that they can be. And then, once again, on the left, you'll just see kind of the main areas that we went over. And then these are just a few of the observations that we wanted to highlight, what we found out for the schools. There was a insufficient distribution between funds for necessary purchases for worn-out equipment and uniforms. we noticed that some sports were getting a little bit more funding, or they were having a little bit more of, they were getting more newer uniforms than some other sports. There was an inadequate participation or funding for female athletic programs. It's not hidden that a lot of female sports don't really necessarily always have the participation for it. Not necessarily school's fault, but that's one thing we did notice. Inequitable funding raising events for female sports and boy sports. Ensuring that every member is in compliance with House Bill 865 or the Zachary Martin Act, which a brief overview of those is making sure that any volunteer or any coach in any sport know how to use defibrillators, have a first aid knowledge, and that also, and Zachary Martin includes like making sure there's suitable cooling down zones, especially for football, to make sure that all the students are being safe. And then ensuring that coaches are enforcing district policies considering self-drive and non-school provided transportation. And then our last one that we noticed was after we had looked at the overall expenditures of the equipment and supplies, we noticed that once we take the football charges out of both of those for both schools, it made the charges to be considerably more equitable than originally. I believe for Lake Mineola, it was 72% for boys and like 24% for girls. And then after we took the football charge out, it was, I want to say 42 or 46% for boys and then 54% for girls. So taking football out, the schools ended up being a lot more equitable with their distribution of funds. And then our 2 recommendations for the schools. For their fundraising efforts, one thing we did notice is that, for example, like the girls' teams will have more fundraising efforts that they were doing, lesser than the boys. And so we have a recommendation for the schools to ensure that both sports, both girls and boys sports, are fundraising for the same amount of times. So especially if they're doing it for uniforms, so making sure there's a system in place for the sports to be able to acquire the fundraising for the uniforms. But we also recommend, so mainly the girls' teams, like for baseball example, they do extra fundraising for breast cancer awareness uniforms. So obviously that is okay, but for like the general uniform, making sure that they stay equitable between that. And then reducing risk in self-drive sporting events. There is a travel release form that is given, but kind of making sure that the athletic directors are being more on top of that. We noticed that they were doing it like once a season.
At the beginning of the season.
At the beginning of the season. And that there should be a couple more forms that they should be doing for like signing in, signing out if the student takes a bus there but then wants to come home by themselves or by their parent.
The risk isn't that they don't have a self-drive form on file. The risk is that for the event that they are allowed to do a self-drive to, that there's no signing sheet to sign out and to remind them that they cannot share a ride with another student. And we sat down with risk management and went over all this, and they would be extremely happy if that sign out sheet or sign in, however you want to say it, the signing sheet for that event was documented, and then the athletic director did one more verification to make sure all the travel release forms are on file. Self-drive travel release forms are on file, which most are because it's in their initial package. So
So the semester starting, this student is allowed to drive form is fine?
yes, they're on file, and that's all electronic. However, for the event, let's say they go from Mineola to East Ridge for a
No, I understand,
baseball game.
on a bus, and they want to ride home with their parents or drive home or whatever, then they have a
The drive
sign
home,
out.
actually, they do have the sign out for the drive home
Okay.
on those. They're doing a very good job of those. But it was just for when, let's say the baseball team decides we're going to just drive from Mineola to East Ridge, no bus is required. So there's just no, since they have the travel release forms, they're saying, well, that's fine, then just go. But then nobody's verifying that there's not ride sharing
Oh, gotcha.
going on. And from experience, I was at Bishop, back when I was at Bishop Moore and my son was playing, and this is only Orange County, this wasn't Lake. But I noticed when it was self-drive, I noticed a couple kids piling out of a car. So I'm not saying Lake's doing that. I'm just saying I saw it at Orange County. So it's just, if nobody's monitoring it, then that risk is there, and that's all we're saying, is if there's no form for that event, and that's where risk management would like that form for that event, that we're doing a self-drive to. And I don't think there's a lot from what we've gathered. It's really spotty, but there are events where it's close by and they do self-drive.
So to be clear, we want to make sure, and like, for example, when I was on the golf team in high school, we self-drove everywhere, except maybe districts, we got a van. But other than that, the intent is for every student to then drive themselves to and from these events, or is there a form for students to ride together?
According to RIS, we cannot share, right, in other words, if you're a student, you cannot
Sure.
share with your classmate to ride with you.
Okay.
Now, does that only apply during school hours, or?
This is after, because events are after school hours,
So-
right?
Okay.
It's a
So-
school event.
So like, let's say your sports event is not until 7 o'clock at night or something, you don't need to be there till 5 or 6, or I don't know. You've already gone home for the day. Me as a student, I can't swing by and pick up Tyler at his house and
Yeah.
arrive at the event.
I didn't go into that. I mean, we would have to ask Rob
Okay.
more about
Well,
that.
I think this is a very interesting component you've added into this audit, because this, I think, is not specific to Title IX, but it's certainly a noteworthy one to.
It was just something we picked up.
Yeah, to mitigate some risk for the district, because I do, would have some concerns about students driving themselves,
Yeah.
or driving other students,
Others.
particularly during.
I think it was the other that really got us.
Yeah, because, I mean, they obviously, they drive themselves to and from school to begin with. They might check out early, go to a dentist appointment or whatever it is, they drive themselves, or, but driving others, I'm concerned about that. So I don't know that this is necessarily a disadvantage of gender, but rather a disadvantage of large or small sports teams, right?
Yeah.
So now if I'm on the golf team and there's only a few people, or some other small sport, you know, how do we possibly transport ourselves? Let's say I'm in ninth grade, I can't drive yet. Now what?
Parents usually take them, I think.
Yeah, and so certainly that's not always.
I mean,
you know.
when my son was a freshman, I mean, I transported him
Yeah,
to the
so-
event.
I would say that's an access issue, though, because you have the ability to drive versus somebody that doesn't. So I think it's more of a small, like you suggested. I know that. Because then, once you get into the let's rent a van, then you have to have like 5 school board employees, so only 2 students are able to be transported in the van. And then you have to buy 5 vans, and then that's the cost of a school bus for 12 people. That is a mess, I will tell you. Like,
Yeah.
we've experienced that, having girls on small sports teams.
And we only saw this when we were going through transportation, making sure that between genders, that we're being equitable in transportation. All of a sudden, we saw some self-driving
Sure.
events, and it was like, wait a minute, what's this?
Well, and with
So
the
we
rising
looked
cost of
into it.
transportation, I think self-driving becomes more attractive as well. So there is definitely some work to be done in that
It
area.
does, but that access really has me concerned, because, you know, if you have a
It's
parent
huge.
who can't just leave in the middle of, you know, school, work day, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, to go drive their kids somewhere until they are able to start driving themselves, you know, I just don't want that to become a barrier for kids to participate before they turn 16.
Both principals, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, both said that all events, they provide busing,
Yeah,
correct?
both schools do provide transportations. That's what they had told us. I know for Umatilla, they had said that their boys' varsity's baseball team opted out for school-provided transportation. So that baseball team at Umatilla, only for the varsity, I don't know about their JV team, is all self-driven. So that's what the schools had told us.
But I will also tell you that it's not just to get to the events. In Eustis's perspective, in our world, the baseball and the softball team are off campus, the fields. So it's not after hours, it's at 2:30 to get to practice.
That's right, they have to go to practice.
And that's the
too.
middle of the day. And so
And same thing with any other off-campus, like
Off-campus,
golf. I mean, they're all
swimming.
off-campus.
Sure.
Water polo.
Yeah.
So any of these sports would be off campus, right? And
Anything
so-
that, yeah.
So now it's not
We don't have
just
the
a.
facility.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so now
not
it's not
just
just a
events.
parent needs to, maybe once or twice a week during the sports season, but now it's every day. And so I guess I'm just really interested to think about, we understand the risk and we need to, you know, adhere to that, but now how do we make sure that this doesn't become a barrier for kids to participate before they turn 16 years old? Or can drive themselves.
Well, and even after, like, I fully appreciate in sport risk management, want to mitigate that risk as much as we can, but there is a practicality aspect to it. There's a waiver to drive with someone else with parent consent and reasonable insurance limits or whatever else. I think if you can do that one time during a season, I think that's fairly reasonable to have on file, and just a way to mitigate, because, yeah, I mean, kids are going to ride together. It doesn't make sense to take 6 cars to an event or whatever else if you can avoid it. but being able to protect the district is certainly a concern, but yeah.
Well, and the student, I would say,
Absolutely.
and the high school student.
Yeah.
Yeah, many of these events are out of county, or, I think my daughter had a tennis tournament that was going to require her to take I-4 to get there. I said, absolutely not. You've been driving for 10 minutes. You're not driving I-4. No way. And luckily I was in the position where I was able to take her to that. But, I think, for most working parents during the school day, that would have been a challenge.
It is a challenge.
Want to finish?
And then to wrap up the audit, we have review and revise, basically, just to ensuring that there's an implementing and evaluating the existing policies that the schools have to address disparities and promote equal access to resources, strengthen processes, basically enhancing and standardizing more processes to eliminate bias or discrimination, resource allocation, and to develop a fair and transparent environment for all athletes, implement procedural controls, establishing clear guidelines for decision-making and resource distribution to monitor compliance, support regular audits and reviews, and then promoting accountability, foster a culture of accountability by providing trainings to emphasize the importance of fair treatment and opportunities for all athletes, regardless of gender.
That's for Dr. Tracy. Sorry.
It's okay.
Can I ask a question about the fundraising component? I think I heard you say that you found that girls' sports are out fundraising boys' sports. Can you speak about that? Is there a reason? That seems to me like they're trying to raise money for stuff that they need. Is that because they're not being
And
provided
that's what we're
they
saying,
need, or is that-
we need to make sure in their budgeting process that they're being equitable. Like Elena said, if the girls softball team wants to go pink for cancer awareness.
Understand.
Then that's a separate thing.
Sure.
That outside of the school, what the school provides or what the district provides in the athletic programs. So if it's particular for that, that's fine. But we were seeing just a disparity between fundraising, just for
But you didn't know what they
regular
were
activity.
fundraising for.
We didn't dig into it, it's
Right.
just, we're just looking at it overall, and we're just saying, hey, be careful, because you're crossing the line somewhat where the majority of your fundraising programs fall under the females and less under the males. So it just doesn't look good from the surface. I mean, you dig down and maybe you find out, oh, they want to paint the dugouts, or they want to add new bleachers or something like, it maybe is, but I think just overall, it just looks like there's a disparity, and you're making your girls raise money, and your boys are not, from the top.
Where
So
does
just
it
be
fit
careful.
with the booster club relationship? Because it was my understanding each school's booster club, it's incumbent on them that there's some equitable distribution.
Not both
Am I wrong
schools
about
haven't
that?
had a booster club. So
Huh?
Not both. Only one of the schools had a booster club, the other did not.
Only Umatilla High School has a
Yes.
booster program, and Lake Mineola does not,
Does
so
not.
that's kind of another thing.
Yeah, so you got a disparity there when you
Yeah.
don't have a booster club.
I believe Lake Mineola's reason for not having a booster club was because, I think it was kind of because it's a newer area, that they don't have a lot of older family, as in older, I mean, like, they don't have a lot of continuing children, so parents aren't interested in having to
Right, keeping that,
keep it all up. But
Keep it going.
Umatilla, where it's a little bit smaller, a little bit older, you got a lot more returning students,
Yeah.
brothers, sisters, going through new
Who
grades.
who gave you that story?
That was Lake Mineola, when we had our first initial meeting with them, we had asked about
asking
it.
them why they didn't have a booster. What they have is the athletic fund, where they populate the money from parking lot sales and ticketing
And then-
sales, so
and
it
then-
all comes in
And
there.
how was that distributed?
Well, by budgeting then, each of the programs
By the
budget.
administrator?
Mhm. And then the athletic director would look over the budgets and make sure. So, and then they have programs for uniforms, how, like away and home, every other year is kind of how they were telling us how it would work if if everything worked out perfect, I guess.
Is it standard practice to factor out the football? Obviously, that's.
Well, we did that just because it
It's
was
quite an
definitely a
outlier.
disparity
Yeah.
when you looked at it from the top. And I told Elena, I said, well, what if we pulled football out? Would it then look more equitable? And it did kind of help us make it look more equitable. But from the top, I mean, football is
Yeah.
expense-wise, but it's also from the revenue side, they generate a lot more money too. So, and, you know, because of concussion protocols and things like that, I think they went out and they were spending money for new helmets, which makes sense, you know, for safety reasons. So, and then a lot of the equipment for football is directed towards safety, you know, shoulder pads and other pads that they wear in their pants and rib area, I guess, you know, that they're spending. Those are expensive. I mean, it's a lot of money. Helmets are really expensive, FYI, so,
I have a question.
yes.
Did you find, I think the two schools that you used are very different.
That was the idea, was
yeah.
to go with two different.
But my question is, most schools have a rotating schedule for uniforms. You mentioned uniforms. Did both these schools have a rotating schedule?
Yes.
I think they did.
Yes.
A little bit different, but I think they did.
Yeah, both of them I think had it on different kind of, they did have a schedule. I believe Lake Minneola's was, they do, it's every 2 years. So like the first 2 years, they do the going away uniforms, and then the other 2 years is the home uniforms. So both schools do have a rotating schedule
Okay.
of which ones they have to
So
do.
in the rotating schedule, was there not a place for the cancer awareness or whatever uniform? That would always be above
That
and
would be
beyond?
above and beyond any,
Okay.
because, you know, it's,
I think the students will have to choose if they want to do that. And
Okay.
it's typically only the female sports ones that do
Okay.
the breast cancer awareness ones.
So now, just to be clear, I'm following the numbers correctly. So like on, for example, the attachments on Umatilla High School revenue, is that the gates and the concessions and everything and the booster funding given to the high school, or what else comprised in that revenue number?
Of the revenue, it was, yes, it was all those factors.
All those, so everything, so the booster contributions and then what the school generates from ticket sales and concessions and everything else all in one? Okay. And then Lake Minneola's would be done the same way, just without a booster club, so it'd be their gates plus whatever fundraising each individual sport does? I mean, because Lake Minneola's still $282,000 in revenue, and Umatilla's at $150,000, which is strong. Umatilla boosters do a fantastic job at raising money. It's just interesting to see the differences and that Lake Minneola's still so well-funded, at least from a top-line number. Granted, they've got more kids and more.
I was going to say, they got that.
Of course, but still.
Football
it's-
probably drives
that's
a ton of
That's a heck
money.
of a number. And to say that only 26,000 of the expenditures is football seems a little low to me, but you guys have the numbers, so that's believable. So anyway, it's good data. Thank you.
And what I'll do is her worksheets, I'll clean them up so that
Yeah.
I can give them to Don and Mr. Farnsworth. So, because what they would like to do is the schools to do a self-audit each, like every other, he wants to do 2 a year. So, so over what, a 4-year period, all 8 schools would be self-auditing themselves. And maybe the new director then could pick and choose every couple years to verify those numbers, validate those numbers to make sure that they're accurate. You should always do that. You should make sure their self-reporting is accurate.
Are we charging back field maintenance to the programs?
I don't think so.
It's on here.
No?
I didn't hear the question. Was it?
Are we charging for field maintenance, the sports?
No, we were just picking up the cost that
But-
they were spending on it, just to make sure between facilities, whether it's where the money's going in each of the gym.
I will clarify, because I know
Yeah.
you did the audit, so you pulled the numbers, but they only do the field. So like if you picture the softball field, they're maintaining the grass in the outfield. They touch nothing. The concession stand area, grasses around the stands, that's all done by the school. They only maintain the athletic fields, and I know we've got people here, but there is maintenance beyond just the field.
They're not doing the infields?
Oh, there's the infield's dirt. I'm talking about softball now, but I'm just trying to give you a
like
picture.
cutting grass.
Like if
Yeah.
you go to the fence, go outside the field. There's all sorts of stuff that has to be done in that area that's not included in our.
It's not included in our maintenance. But
But is that not included in the
Mr. Carr.
school's custodial?
is the,
No?
so as an expense, field maintenance, that we're charging back to the school to pay, do you know what that, Mrs. Luke is saying that our maintenance contract, I'm trying to understand where the separation is between our maintenance contract that we approved, the $250,000 or whatever, and why booster clubs or schools, what would they pay for?
Well, it's a couple different concepts as far as the charge back.
Well, right now, we're talking Lake Mineola and Umatilla.
Right. Lake Neal and Umatilla, okay, the way I see it, and I'll ask Scott Ward to chime in, is that the overall the overall maintenance fee by JSM, each school, and this is where Scott needs to come in, it's my understanding they would pay a proportion share, or it comes out of our, which comes out of our general fund as far as the overall maintenance. And then as far as usage, that's other than our sanctioned sports teams. For example, it's a third party. That would then be Rob Boyer for under the uses and maintenance fees that would be in that small fee that's for the usage of the field.
Is my understanding correct that and I'm picturing, if you want to go to Umatilla, so go to Umatilla in your head, there's the football field with the track, but then there's grass outside of that in the stands area, like over where they just planted
That's maintained internally.
by the school.
That is correct. Right, anything inside the track is through a contract that we have.
Right.
For varsity field maintenance.
Right. And then for off-site fields,
Off-site fields, well, as far as, for example, we could use Eustis as an off-site field for both softball and baseball. Those fields are under our contract that we have for our varsity fields.
but what about outside the field?
It falls under the same parameter. So the fence line, we would weed control, and outside the fence, the school would be responsible for. Is that?
Yeah, so that was right, so I don't know who's doing it for off-campus. just-
That contract, the athletic fields contract, is that just game fields, or is that includes practice fields too?
It
right?
does.
Right,
The
right.
practice fields don't get the attention.
Right,
of
right,
game
not the same
fields.
level.
That is correct, but yes, sir, it does.
Okay. We need to wrap, because I think your guy just got.
Any other
Any other
comments?
questions for
Well,
Elaine?
I just want to hear a little bit about this experience, because you're a bit of a pioneer for us and coming in and putting together a great presentation. Any words of wisdom or reflection on your experience doing this, or, as we move
Good, the
forward,
bad, and
maybe
the
with
ugly.
interns in the future?
I think this was
Consider?
this was a great experience. I want to say thank you for letting me have this opportunity, for being able to do this. This was really cool for me to be able to do this. Definitely something I will be thinking about a lot. I have thought about a lot, actually. I'm doing a business degree, strategic leadership at Lake Sumter. So I'm doing a lot of accounting classes and stuff like that. So this experience has really helped with my classes to be able to relate. I'm like, as I'm going through this, I did accounting this last semester. So I was like, oh, I know what I'm looking at now. I can do this. So it's really cool for me to be able to kind of connect everything that I'm learning in the classroom with the real life experiences. So I've definitely really enjoyed this process. I don't really have any good, bad, or ugly. I think this was, so, only good words. I think this was really a great experience. It was super great working with Mr. Mock and being able to work with all of you guys. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Great.
I definitely
Great
encourage to keep doing this. I know there are a lot of other students would love to have an opportunity like this. So
I know you can't imagine this, but I mapped this all out, so to hand it off is going to be really easy. I mean, she came in and I gave her an internship guide to internal auditing. Literally, I mean, it was, I don't know how many pages long. And then I had all 15 weeks mapped out. I think we stayed on schedule. We stayed on schedule that whole time. I mean, without doing that, 15 weeks goes by in the blink of an eye. And without mapping it out like that, if I hand this off to the individual that comes in, I'm definitely, hopefully give them, the blueprint for success, because it went really smooth. There's always hiccups. I learned some things, obviously, that I would do it a little bit different the next time, so I would obviously share that with that person. But for the most part, I think it went extremely smooth, so.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Elaine. Great job.
Well, Mr. Mock, we appreciate your leadership and preparing things so that she could come in, and we certainly do appreciate you, and we appreciate the fine work that you did, and thank you for the presentation today.
Thank you, Elaine. Rob, you're going to be up next. Come on. I think they want to do, you want to do the wellness?
No, you
first?
can do it. He's here, so go ahead.
Okay. You could do,
Lake Mineola.
yep, can we do the Lake Mineola addition construction closeout project? And Cars, Riggs, and Ingram performed that construction closeout audit for the school district, and I'll let Mr. Brolin, I think y'all have met Mr. Brolin before, and he will present that. I think we'll also have it up on the two things as well.
Okay, good.
There we go. If you just want to tell him what page you're on.
Yeah.
That way he can scroll down to it, because I don't know if this thing scrolls or what, but.
No, doesn't move.
Oh, yeah,
Look at
there you
that.
go.
I
Look
can
at
do
that.
it.
You can do it yourself.
Well, good morning. It's still morning. Good morning. It's a pleasure to present to you today the results, first of all, of the Lake Mineola project. So this is, if you recall, those of you present when we did the Lake Point Academy project, same thing, same process, same approach. Again, identifying various savings and improvements. So this is the format of the report. You've gone through it. This is our cover letter, setting before you the structure of the report, and the real meat comes in the results matrix in the exhibit. This is where you get the overall executive summary. So you can see here, it was a design build agreement. That's where as a reminder, because you're doing a different one on the current project with really a Cole Academy. This one's a design build where Wellbro, as the vendor, the contractor, was also the designer. And so it's a contract delivery method where the designer and the builder, they can be the same firm or they can be a partnership to do the work, but this is the model they did. When it comes to the nature of it, it's still a cost of work with a fee, negotiated overhead and profit fee. So what you need to think about there is they can only bill, well, they can bill what they want, but they can only get paid for what they actually incur. So it's their actual cost. And so that's why the audit's so important, because they can just bill whatever. How do you know they didn't overbill you unless you verify it? And that's what this is all about. This is a cost verification engagement project, and that's what we did, okay? So the fee is already determined, negotiated as part of the contract negotiation process between management and Wellbro. And actually the board, as a board, you actually approve that contract ultimately, so you approve that fee. But then after that, you've engaged us to come in and look at those costs to make sure they're based on actual, which means they've been able to support those costs through payroll data, okay? The hourly rates, the hours, we look at all that. We look at, biggest part of the cost of the project that is billed is really a pass-through, because Wellbro doesn't actually do the work. They are the overall management team you've engaged to oversee all the subcontractors that actually do the work. It's usually around 90% of the costs come from them. So we really look, drill down and really cover, we look at about 90%. So these are about sample size. That's tremendous coverage. We look at 90% of the subcontractor costs and validate 90% of it. That means all the change orders that they have. And you think of change orders, important distinction here. You might think, well, change orders are only going to come when we know about them when the GMP. The GMP is the guaranteed maximum price. That's the number that's fixed, not to exceed, unless there are change orders. Okay, and there were no change orders that increased the GMP. So when I say change orders, I mean what I'm talking about is you did approve within that guaranteed maximum price a contingency fund. Okay, so there's things you're going to anticipate that are going to come along that are going to be not unforeseen type of things, and that contingency fund is going to be used. And now it's already part of what you approved, but the use of that still isn't. They're not just allowed to use that however they want. And so when I say change orders, I mean contingency usage. There was a lot of contingent usage, which are change orders between Wellbro and the sub that management does see, and they do review that, and that's signed off. Those are the things we looked at and scrutinized, because each subcontract is a lump sum. Okay, so think about this. You have 30 or 40 subcontracts. They go through a bidding process, and they go through they have anywhere from at least 3 or more, sometimes it's 2 if they can't get more, but they go through and they, meaning Wellbro on your behalf, goes through a procurement process that's appropriate, and they take the lowest responsive bidder, and then that number's fixed. Okay, so we start with that fixed lump sum number, and then we audit that all the way up until what they actually say, they end up billing you through Wellbro. Okay, that's what we're auditing, that's what you want to keep in mind. And so it's very comprehensive, and you can see it's very much it's a deep dive into what they're actually incurring and billing. We're verifying all that. Okay, so here's the executive summary. We had, here's a good example where the contract, a good contract, provides for, in this case, cost avoidance, okay? So in other words, you see that burden number, labor burden, had in the contract not to exceed 40%. Well, they went over that. That money came right back to you. It was a great, I have a number of clients before we can get in there and help them and say, hey, by the way, here's all the things you ought to put in there to protect yourself. We haven't been able to do that for them, or they didn't get some good help on that, and they don't have a not to exceed on that. And what do you think the contractor does? They bill whatever they can show they've incurred, they can just bill. And there's no restriction on what can go into burden. How are you going to define burden, okay? So if you have a not to exceed, you don't have to fight on ultimately what can go into burden. You spell that out as well. But if you had not to exceed, it doesn't really matter what they try to argue they can put in there. At the end of the day, they can't be more than 40%. So that's an adjustment right there. And then there's a fee adjustment with that difference, right? So the fee associated with that comes back to, that's the $972. And then on the fee itself, we also audit the fee, because the fee starts out as a agreed upon fixed number or percentage, but then we went through, they kept adding to that fee. So we kept asking them, prove to us the fee. Why would that fee go up? Because they didn't actually increase the GMP. And so basically, as we went through that process, we identified forcing them just to do the reconciliation. They came back and acknowledged that there's another $19,494 that needed to come back to the district. So that's just the differences, the recovery that has come back to the district just from our audit, actual procedures we did, okay. And then down here, we also provide, as we're going through that, and in fact, I made reference to this in number 1, to even do some more things, additional improvements to the contract to mitigate them charging for things that you're like, we don't want to be charged for that. Well, whenever you're not very specific about something, that leaves the door open. And I always tell people that it's not so much what's in the contract, it's not like that's in the contract that gets you in trouble and leaves you open to get charged for things that you would say, I think we should be charged for that. It's what's not in there, right? It's putting in there very much being specific. And one of them is having an itemized breakout of labor burden. Again, that way you keep that. Also, it helps to even pre-audit those numbers. So as you're looking through those numbers and negotiating that number, it helps be clear on what really belongs in there. Another item that came up that we thought was excessive, based on our experience, was the daily cleanup that they charged. But at the end of the day, there wasn't a specific clause to kind of really to limit that. And so we're saying, let's put a clause in there to make that clear, and that way we don't have to have that kind of.
To make that clear is you pointed out in the audit committee meeting is in the contract, each of the subcontractors are required to do their own cleanup.
Right.
But then what happens is then the construction manager charges us cleanup too. So it seems like we're getting charged twice. I mean, the subcontractor is supposed to be cleaning this up, and then the construction manager has to go back in and clean too. So it doesn't make, that's where, the audit says, well, we're getting charged twice.
Right, and so it is accurate that they're gonna have to do some cleanup after the subs, right? The subs do their thing. There is some general cleanup. But you need to have a threshold in there. I mean, if they're really just going in, if the subs really aren't doing their job, and they're just cleaning up and then charging, if you don't have something clearly spelled in there that essentially it should be clearly defined that if they do any cleanup at all of any, and establish some sort of threshold, then they should be going back, it shouldn't be charging the district. They should be back charging, which means going back and charging the sub, like Tom said, so you don't get charged for it. I would say, look, you already have cleaning in there. It's the burden of proof is on the contractor to document and show that, the sub has done their cleaning. and here's some kind of cleaning throughout that they might do. They're going to have some of that. But really, what they're really doing, where they do have a true responsibility is final cleanup. Okay, at the end of the job, subs are gone, you got to clean the place up, right? And that's built in, they do have final cleanup.
Do you have that number broken out anywhere on what the daily cleanup charges were and excessive or not excessive and all that? I'm just looking through the.
Yeah, no, I don't have that in the report because since it wasn't something that was considered to be an issue because the contract, because they were able to provide evidence that they did go back to the subcontractors, so that's not in the report. I could get that number for you.
Yeah, no, I'm
I
just
don't have
curious.
it.
I mean,
I
if
don't
we're
have
saying
it.
that
I
it's
don't have it
excessive,
handy.
I'd like to see what it is so that
Yeah.
we can build something in like the not to exceed 40% of the
Sure,
burden.
sure, I could provide that.
And learn from this other than just
Right,
having you do it every time. If we can learn from it, would be
Sure.
helpful for me.
sure.
Yeah, I think the last job was COVID-related, or at
Yeah.
least kind of driven that way.
COVID was, yeah, no, I could do that, though.
Sure,
What
thank
I
you.
could do is I could get with management and provide that data, and that's a really good, like you said, that'd be very helpful, and the management can figure out, okay, what do you want to set? And what you can do there, then, just like with general conditions as a whole, which they do have, which is good, they have a not to exceed in general conditions, which is just so you understand, the two big pots of money are general conditions / general requirements, which essentially is what the design builder, in this case, Wellbro, is charging the district to do their job as far as managing the project, which means all of their salaries and payroll, as well as their kind of out-of-pocket expenses, which a piece of that would be the cleanup, okay? Like, picking up trash. They go around, you can't have each sub allocate trash. They do all that stuff. So any type of general requirements, like it sounds, general, and think of requirements, think of general out-of-pocket expenses that it takes to kind of manage the whole project. And then, of course, the biggest chunk of that's going to be their payroll. But yeah, so that's something, so there's already, the good thing is, there is already a limitation on general requirements and conditions. There's not to exceed on that, which they stayed within. Now, the thing we always watch for is trying to charge things in the wrong bucket. Okay, so the other big bucket is the subcontractors. Okay, and I already said it's 90% of that. You can see where, if you're not looking at that kind of carefully, that big of a number, you can kind of just say, wait a minute, why is so-and-so being charged what I call below the line? In other words, one of they might have a tradesman that does this type of cleanup work or whatever, and you might see them being charged, down in the sub lines down there, and see, why would they do that? Well, if they're going to go over the not to exceed general conditions, it's kind of, they might want to say, well, they might try to justify it and say, well, this relates more to sub work, we're helping them. And so, no. This is sub work and this is general conditions. And we look at that. But yeah, we could provide,
It seems to me that you have a lot of empirical knowledge of what that should maybe look like.
yeah.
And I see Mr. Cole's been reading it, so maybe the two of y'all can get it in the contracts and call it a day. Whatever's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't
That's
see
the key.
where it's going to be really hard to keep up with. You've got the labor number, which was great. And I don't know how if somebody's cleaning up, I don't know how you
Well, what you would do is,
zoom in.
right.
How
So,
much money we've been talking about.
yeah, so you come up with the not to exceed, essentially, that would be the negotiation point, right? So in other words, you would just say, we're not going to just allow this to just be a general number that, because they can go, every number within the general conditions, they can be below it or above it. That's pretty common, because those are estimates. But then in the overall general condition number, they'll say this is a not to exceed. And if they feel like they're going to exceed it, like anything else, they have to come back and justify, well, why are you telling us you need more money? And then it's transparent, and management can decide whether or not that's legitimate. And sometimes they've come back and they've said no. Well, we had a case that said no, and it comes out of their fee, which is good. It doesn't come out of your pocket. It's okay, you needed more money. Well, we don't, to you, it's just, you didn't budget enough. That's on you. Take it out of your fee.
Or you didn't manage it well.
Or you didn't manage it well, yeah.
So on this project, did Wellbro come back and tell us they needed more money on anything?
No, not in terms of, not to where it increased the GMP.
Okay.
No.
Well, because I understand what you're saying, and I
Yeah.
appreciate your knowledge and what you're doing here, but it's just
Yeah.
sometimes it seems like we're saying that all GCs are doing some of these nefarious things and subs are doing that and doing this, and doesn't seem like that's the case in this one so far, thankfully.
Yeah.
But I just want to be careful with how we're doing this. I think we've got some good working relationships and don't want to just
Yeah, no.
kick a beehive for no reason.
Agreed.
It's
So
not
when
in this
right.
case.
And when I'm saying this is more about just, I would think of this more as, think along the lines more as I'm not, I never use the word nefarious or,
Yeah.
Inappropriate. It's really a matter of cost control.
Sure.
And putting in good cost control items. Again, a good example is the not to exceed labor burden amount. A good example is not to exceed general conditions.
Yeah.
And then the fact that there's good transparency on when the subs come back and say, you know, hey, this is my lump sum, but
Yeah.
because of this, and this, need more money. And then management's involved in that. And of course, Wellbros is you've hired them not to simply say yes. They're supposed to start by saying, it's like insurance companies, right, tonight, and then you got to come back. Start by saying no, meaning your burden of proof is on the sub, and say, why do we need to go above what you have?
Perfect.
Okay. Let me see anything else on here. Yeah, like one of the ones that establishes a threshold in the final cleaning, that's number 3. Oh, one of the things too, number 4 is getting at sometimes, you know, in terms of making changes, if they have a certain amount of, they list out, at the beginning, list out who are the team members on their side, you know, you're always gonna have a project executive, they're executive over the whole thing. You're always gonna have, but it's required to have a project manager or a senior project manager, again, depending on how big it is, assistant project manager, you always have a superintendent. And so you want to be careful of there is, you know, since it's a cost plus, you know, and you get paid for your actual cost, you want to kind of look at that. You don't want them switching out team members on you, and that stuff needs to be pre-approved. And also, you kind of look at the team up front. Management will know better about this, the size and the project. Say, well, do they really need 20 people to manage this project based upon the size? Okay, and so that's going to go build into their cost. So if they're building up their costs, say, here's our estimate for our general conditions or requirements, that's where management will look at that, and they'll say, okay, no, we don't need a project manager, assistant project manager, you know, superintendent and assistant superintendent. And so you kind of want to, that's something to look at, and that's from their experience. They'll know from projects working, you know, they'll know, no, we don't need that, you know, that many people. And that would affect the estimate they come back with, right? When that team shrinks down to what it should be, then you're going to have a lesser overall GMP. But this is specifically talking about, you know, as it's pre-approved, so then if there's any adjustments to that, they would need to come back and get an approval from management. And then finally, so this is one where I think they have an overall not to exceed, but it wasn't a clear distinction between general conditions and general requirements in the contract. And so I think that it'd be better to clarify that and to separate those even because they're very different. General conditions is really dealing with payroll, and they really have a pretty good idea of that. You know, they're estimating the hours, but they know what the rates are. And the general requirements, you know, that's their out-of-pocket expenses to do the work essentially. And so it's just, again, the more type of things you have and break out, and it's just better cost management for you. So any questions on that? Any other questions, I should say?
So like
Good
on number
questions.
3, on the establishing a threshold, do you have or can you provide, like with your experience, what a reasonable percentage or cost of that should be so we can, again, build that in as a not to exceed number?
Yeah, it's really going to vary by the size of the project.
Sure.
You know, and the number of subs.
Yeah.
So what we recommend is like a percentage, and it's more about transparency and they have to come back then.
Sure.
Again, if it's overall part of the general conditions, management might not even be paying close attention to that because they're going to say, well, we're still under the general conditions.
Right.
But if you say, what we're suggesting is say a certain percentage, maybe you say 5%. You know, 10%, whatever management, where they're forced at that point, regardless if they're way under the overall general conditions, then they have to come back and have that conversation. And that's the best time to do it, is forcing that conversation real time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Would there be a protocol where you would say, like, in this instance, there was an addition that was built, in this instance, it's a school, so it's obviously going to be a greater cost. In this instance, it's just whatever we're building, and could we not build at the district level some kind of a percentage that's associated with the size of or the scope of the work, so that then we could put that percentage in? Or would you say, because at this point, what you just suggested is a certain percentage, but is
Yeah.
it 20% of the project, or is it 50? We don't know until we
Yeah,
reconcile
well,
the
you know what?
cost.
Type of
All it does is it
Right.
forces the conversation.
Right.
So you could just say, we're going to make it 10%.
And then they can come back and say, no, that's
And
why
it's not
not.
telling them they can't have it. There's nothing really to fight over, because you're saying that it's not like the 40, it's not like.
But if it's unrealistic, if 10% of the cost is unrealistic because their cost is really 60% of that, then they're going to be like, no way.
Well, well, then, if then why was your estimate so low in the beginning? That's on them. They're the ones that are supposed to know
So
their
they're
business.
estimating that cleanup cost.
Yes.
In their general.
Yeah, see, they're already doing that. So if they're off 60%, then you're like, what were you doing out there? What else is in there?
Well,
It
the
forces-
assumption is that maybe the subcontractors aren't doing their job. I think that's
Yeah.
what we kind of
Yeah,
looking at.
you're wondering, you really force the conversation, well, why is that? Because again, if you're going along, they're just going to go along. What they're managing in their brains, I'll tell you right now, they're managing the overall not to exceed. And as long as they think they're okay, they're just going to keep on going.
Sure.
And they think they're going to go over, they know it's better for them to say, hey, and they're going to come with their reasons why they need more money. But if you have certain items already built in as, these kind of what we say is typical, doing all these things, the areas in which we see these types of tendencies, the labor burden, cleanup for the reasons stated. Trash pickup, you can do that, but the other one are trucks, which, they're okay in that. Sometimes they'll decide, well, why do you need 8 trucks? I have clients where they limit the number of trucks, and then force them to come back and say, we need one more truck. Well, why another truck, Does everybody need a truck? And in a school district, a lot of times they just drive around in golf carts to get around. You don't need trucks.
And we rent those too.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say you put in a percentage, it can be 10%. And just what it forces then is you're not saying you're limited to that. You still have the overall limitation of general conditions, but at 10%, they have to come back and have
And
a
ask.
conversation.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Great questions. Yeah. Okay. Anything else on what we call, process or better contract process or better practices? You might think of your own as you're reading through the report, don't try, this is not everything. It's a good contract, 'cause over the years, actually, we've provided input
Didn't
ourselves.
you help us with our
Yes.
contract?
Yeah.
Why'd you miss these points?
Yeah, it's kind of, nobody's perfect. I knew that. See, I was waiting for that. Did you do this? How
I was
did
to
you
say,
do
we
this?
stayed under the cost. I mean, the total under cost was there, so, right, we didn't go over.
It is, I'll tell you what, though, it is interesting you say that, but over the years, the reason why, it's like, I'll have a colleague, we do this all the time, and I'll call him up, he'll call me, have you ever seen this one? Someone finds another way, and then guess what? Next time we do a contract, we put that provision in there. So, yeah, exactly. All right. So this just talks about, I kind of just, for those of you who are not as familiar, I try to give you definition of things. I already talked about the contract delivery method, already talked about the contract compensation structure, and then talked about general conditions and requirements. I guess hopefully you guys read through this, so as I was talking about it and defining it, you already had an idea. So I talked about those, I try to define the most common things that, if you're not, familiar with this, because this is not what you do, just try to help you understand, get some understanding back on what's going on. And then the last part there are examples. This is very key. So, when we go to a contract and we're going to help various entities, school districts, county, cities, whatever, private, I go to the cost of work contract, because remember, since it's based upon what there actually can occur, I start by looking to see, do they have good clauses that limit what they can bill? Does it go through and clearly define what's allowable and not allowable? Because at the end of the day, if you don't tell them that you, and again, and this is not saying any negative towards them, but it's just business. You don't say what you can't charge, they're going to charge it as long as it relates to the project. The general rule of thumb is it project related, yes or no? Then you can charge it. Unless we specifically say, here are the things that you have to do and how you charge it, or here are various limitations. And that's what's going to go into that cost of work clause. So it's kind of like, I don't know, the more detailed and long that is usually a better sign. If it's brief and not much to it, that's usually just by rule of thumb. If you look at something and you look at the cost of work clause as a board member and go, there's not much in here, that's not a good sign. You expect that to be pretty detailed and pretty comprehensive. Okay? We talked a lot about that. This is just, I like to show the overall recap of the project, get a sense of things. So for example, so here's the original GMP, and everything you can see is going down, which is a good sign. But sometimes I want you to know what the actual cost of the project was, because ODP, how did I define that? I have to find it below the table. So those are your owner direct purchases. Now you do that as a public sector entity, since you don't pay sales tax, you get that savings. Okay? So the way to get that savings though is you have to take it out of the project and directly pay for those materials. So your real savings is the sales tax, not the whole amount. And I say that, and sure, you understand, I had some boards that thought, oh, look at all the money they saved. Well, yes, the sales tax is your savings, not, you still pay for the materials. Okay, so this kind of shows you the real cost of the project, which, again, it still came under for, the main reasons I listed there is, obviously there was the sales tax savings. There was just some allowances built in that didn't get used. So that was a big chunk of the savings. And then the third piece of the savings was they came under what they estimated. Because remember, the guarantee maximum price, it's for them, they need to be conservative, right? They don't want to underestimate and have to then, not get that money. They're gonna do their best to give an estimate that they'll at least meet or come under. And so as part of that final reconciliation, that included savings that was just because the GMP was higher than was needed. And think about that. If you don't do the audit, I always tell people this, and they just come in right at the GMP. If you see a contractor come in right at the GMP, what does that maybe tell you? What should you immediately think? So they built, and you didn't get an audit done, and they build the GMP exactly. Should you feel good about that? What's that?
Up to it.
Yeah, they just build up to it, okay? And when you have the audit, it can't just build up to it, all right? And that's why just the audit itself provides that self-analysis, I'll call it, okay?
So is that why it takes 8 months to get a job cost like that?
Maybe, they're like, wait a minute, we gotta, You really can't, at the end of the day, though, we're still gonna look at everything, so, all right. And so this goes through what we do, our process. I've already described this orally. I spoke through this. This tells you our detailed testing, and I won't read through this. Anybody have any questions of this? I was talking about this as I was going through. Pretty straightforward.
We're good.
Okay. All right, and then here's the items. I already told you about them. This just goes in, these are the two items. So we talked about those already. So now we go to this one. This is our complete reconciliation that shows you what we really looked at. And the thing I want to point out here, we've already talked about the adjustments we identified, which is one and two there. But the other thing is, look at the total reduction at the bottom, though. See, it's really savings is 126,794. It's a lot more than just what we found, and that's because by doing the audit, first thing we say is you need to do your own reconciliation and look at what were your real costs compared to what you billed. Okay? So the audit itself encourages that behavior, if I could put it that way. So if you don't do the audit, there's really no reason, why, there's no requirement for them to do that. Okay? And by saying do that and then we're going to audit that, you can see where that goes. The audit itself creates, they go back and they do their own analysis before we identify it and say, okay, here, by the way, here's the amount of charges we've identified that are not billable. That gets added to what we found, okay, which we look at that as well. And that's why you have a total reduction back to you of almost 129,000.
So to be clear, on the 85,000, all that was found by Wellbro or by whoever and the design builder before or in conjunction with the audit. So that's when they did that self-perform of it because they knew you were coming out to look at everything, that was what they found there. And then on the 43,000, I mean, to be fair, on the labor burden, if they're at 44.14% and the not to exceed was at 40, and then we just did the math of, okay, well, you owe us back this part. I mean, that's...
You wonder why they didn't do that too, but they left that to us to, I don't want to say fine, but they didn't, that was part of our audit, yeah.
Understood.
But they didn't, there was no pushback on that.
Yeah.
Of course, it was just math.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The one that was, and the fee one was the one we forced. It took us, I'll be honest, on that one, they took a long time to produce that reconciliation. I kept saying to them, the fee is what they try to say a few times. No, that's right, that's what it is. And I said, we need a reconciliation. What you provided us doesn't give us, we can't audit that. And so.
So since it was less than the GMP, the actual number came in and multiplied by whatever their percentage fee was, created that reduction. Okay.
Right, yeah.
Is it safe to say, when I look at the change orders, the majority of those were cost savings, and that would be attributed back to our partners, that when they were doing change orders with the construction, they found us a better rate or a? No,
all those, no.
Okay.
Well, I don't know how much, so it's hard to say as far as the.
That's a yes.
What's that?
When you were, I'm just going, when you were going, yeah, maybe. That's a yes.
Well, no. So.
A change order is when you're changing something to the original plan.
Well, the change order is either one of two things. If it's increased, then they'll say if it's a justifiable, if a change order can be an increase in scope, where you come back and said, we decided we wanted to add this or that.
Right.
So you've actually, you mean the entity, the owner has decided has caused that change order.
Right.
Another one could be, that's the one you really say you'll be interested in saying yes to. Anything else, really, you're going to argue against and say that's not something that we're going to agree to, unless it's an unforeseen circumstance.
Let me rephrase my question. These numbers, these change orders, number 2, number 3, like they're in parentheses, that means they were a savings from the original.
No, those aren't savings. Those are reductions because you directly purchase those materials.
Those are from the direct purchase,
Yes.
all of those.
Except for, the only one there's two things that result in, you could say, our savings from what was originally budgeted, okay? First one would be, they built in an allowance. I think they didn't know, so they had an allowance for a certain thing. Now, of that,
Right.
and John could speak to how much on the, is John still here?
It's usually 2 to 3%.
Okay, the allowance is something built into the, saying this is what we think it's gonna be, and they end up not using that.
Right.
So is that really, is it because they saved the money district by doing something else? What that means, they just didn't have using the allowance. So I don't know that they did something to save you money,
Okay,
okay? It depends on, that allowance might have got used outside the GMP,
okay.
right?
On
And
the
then,
direct
but,
purchase items, those are in the budget, though.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah,
coming out of their
I knew
GMP.
that. So I'll give you my perspective. I wasn't trying to prolong the conversation, but like if I said, I want this specific garage door, and they say, we don't have that garage door, but we can give you these 3 options. So then I'm going to choose, that's making a change. Or, to your point, you know what, we decide we want to go ahead and expand this. We're going to add another 300 square feet. That's a change, right? But it seems to me that there was not, we didn't use all the money in those change orders. That was a savings. Whether it was, we budgeted that and we didn't exceed it, or the garage door we chose was less expensive, or,
well, but it's not really any of
Okay.
that, okay? It's.
okay,
the
that's
two-
okay.
Yeah.
I'm good.
All right.
Sorry.
I can talk to you more.
I was excited about that. I thought that maybe that was suggesting.
I think
that they took
allowance
down some-
for unforeseen is
Well, that's
the
not-
key.
that's not-
You don't
That's not,
necessarily-
yeah, but that's not part of that, what she's asking. So
Well,
the real savings is the sales tax savings.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And then the last piece is you came under,
From the direct
they did
purchase.
come under budget, and you could say that's good management.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But to
Okay.
her point, I think she's saying at the end of the day, we still have this money. It wasn't spent.
It wasn't
Wasn't
spent.
spent on the.
No.
Well, the owner direct
We did- on the
purchases
direct
were
purchases,
spent.
We did spend, but we just spent them on this bucket,
We,
not this.
right, but in that particular budget, they didn't go out.
So your real cost,
So
your
you're
real
saying that
savings
it's-
is the 932, okay? The 932 adds back the ODP, which you really did spend. That's your real, I'll just keep it simple, I won't say anything more if that's okay. 932 is the savings.
So
From
that's
the-
tax
from our
savings
direct
plus
purchase.
whatever else.
Plus
we
coming
use
under
on
budget.
The allowances
Yeah,
and whatever
yeah.
else, yes.
Got it.
Okay, all right.
That was
Got it.
helpful. Thank
Okay,
you.
hopefully that was helpful that way.
Yeah, that was helpful.
Okay,
That's
that's
the-
why I did the table in the first place, I probably just should have said that for you. All right. Sorry about
Why
that.
do you think that they do that, instead of just allowing general contractors that are working on government projects to not pay sales tax?
I'm sorry, say that again.
So subcontractors, you pull those items out because you're saving the sales tax. Why do you think that we have that? Good question. Why is that something the general contractor can do, but they are able to go outside and go directly with us? Because we are the customer in either case.
Well, I thought your question was to be, why did they pass legislation for government to get that? But, so what's happening is.
No, okay, you're this close to what I was asking.
All right, go ahead.
Just eliminate the bureaucracy.
Why would we not eliminate the bureaucracy of having to go outside and just give the general contractors the ability that if you're working on a school project, you don't pay sales tax? Period.
That's the way the statute's written. That you as
But as
the,
an auditor, why do you think that is?
why do
I'm just
they
asking
do
a
it that
random
way?
question. To-
I think it's a matter, because they want to make sure, because the owner is the one that actually gets the sales tax, and they ultimately have that responsibility. They want to make sure they're involved in overseeing that to make sure it's done correctly.
And where the material's going, working with the wholesale distributor, there were some customers that said they were doing a job at such and such church, and the materials
wondering.
were not actually going there.
That's what I was wondering.
And they were saving sales tax.
Yeah, that's logical.
Yeah.
So they have
Okay.
direct responsibility, accountability for that, yeah.
Yeah, I saw the middle guy, what's
totally
happening
makes
there.
sense.
If you see what's happening in the middle, that's.
Right. Okay. Great work, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
Next, are we ready for?
Yeah, I'll let you
Next
guys
one?
bring up the other,
Oh, they'll bring it up,
oh,
the gentleman. in
yeah,
the
so we're
back.
done with this.
Yep.
Can we go to the Wellness Center?
And before the presentation, we have a card.
Okay, Mr. Yocum wants to speak. You want my chair, Mr. Yocum?
Thank you.
That was helpful. That table had the ODPs, the direct transfer.
Does anybody need a
Change
pen?
order was the language that's tripping me up.
First of all,
No, I know.
Mr. Yocum, do you mind if we take a 10-minute break
Sure.
before you speak? Okay, thank you.
I'll just add more things to my list. That's how it works.
Exactly, you still have the same 3 minutes. You can add
Can I have 3 minutes before and 3 minutes after the break?
We're on break.
Some people are questioning the 10 minutes.
Yeah, do we
I'm
need 10
sorry.
minutes?
Some people are questioning the 10 minutes.
Oh, somebody
I'm old-
needs
I'm old,
it.
but I can be done.
I'm sorry. One of your fellow board members needs it.
I'm going to talk about this Wellness Center audit. Probably, I don't know, 3 years ago or so, after the original firm, Care Here, started, they had a presentation that they gave to the board, and they went through a lot of the same things that you see in the attached report with the graphs showing we saved this much and so forth. And I thought it was pretty impressive. But then what happened is I found out when we discussed this that Care Here had sold out to a holding company named, who was that? Premise Health. And the whole discussion in the audit committee was related to all the problems that the staff and the auditors were having with getting cooperation from the auditors, from the Premise Health. And they would not cooperate in providing information to confirm various data and information. And so I just wanted to explain, and from my experience in being an audit, I saw a lot of red flags. I mean, multiple red flags. This firm is not playing nice, and they didn't cooperate with the risk manager, it didn't cooperate with the auditors. My experience is that acquisitions result in lower services provided, if they can do it, to help pay off that purchase price. I've been on committees that we would research what to do to justify a purchase price. And I think that without looking at the whole reputation of the acquiring company, that you should look at that, and that I think that there's enough basis that, one, when you discuss this at the board meeting, that you request that they have a manager here to ask why they would not cooperate, why they would not share information, because the previous Care Here, to my knowledge, did provide access to the information and was very cooperative. And so, and it could be that this is a hedge company and that's what they're doing, is just managing by numbers, but I think there's a real change in the philosophy of the vendor that you hired. And you should consider requesting the manager to be here. And also instruct administration to review the ability to reduce the contract period if Premise Health continues to refuse transparency over documentation, records, and staff. I understand maybe Mr. Cole has weighed in somewhat with people who have asked him about that, so you can follow up on that. But certainly, in my opinion, is that at the very minimum, you ought to look at holding a RFP earlier and really question whether you need to renew that contract until they give you adequate information about why they weren't so easy to work with. And one thing is I would research the public and legal and internet reputation of Premise Health and see what their track record is with other things. And with that, good luck.
Thank you, sir.
Hey. Shall I proceed?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes, please. I'm sorry.
It's all right. There we go. So this is a contract compliance internal audit. So it's similar to the construction one. We are looking at the contract, but we're looking particularly at, the contract, the vendor's compliance with the contract, and then management's managing of that contract. So we look at both aspects of that internal audit. And that's the purpose of this audit of the vendor contract. Again, this outlines structure. So we'll go through. So here's an executive summary. The findings we have, these are our observations. We always use a risk rating when it comes to when we do internal audits in terms of priority. First one deals with the right to audit clause and what resulted in us not being able to get quite a number of documents and information to be able to perform our procedures to verify underlying source data. We'll get into those details. And then secondly, there's a particular item where we were looking for, talking about having proper verification of the required qualifications, permits, and licenses. There were a number of recording metrics that weren't met as required by the agreement. And then there were a couple instances, although this area was just a couple things lacking in terms of the invoice support itself. Important paragraph on there, we put in the executive summary, and I'm just going to read it. We were unable to verify compliance with Premise Health for various key contract attributes due to Premise Health claiming that many of our documentation requests were considered outside the scope of Article 5, which deals with the audit of the agreement clause. District management consulted with the attorney utilized by the school board. District management stated the audit rights as enumerated in Article 5 does not allow access to documents requested by us as enumerated in observations 1 and 4. And so these were limitations that we experienced.
Excuse me, can I stop you for a second? So what have we done about that?
Well, we have our recommendation what to do about it.
What
You
has
could
the
ask-
district done, is what I was asking, not you really.
Okay.
We tried to get an amendment passed and we were rebuffed.
Excuse me?
We tried to work with them on an amendment and they would not accept that.
But we have the ability to audit them, or are they saying we did not?
At the board attorney at the time, not Mr. Cole, read the article, and in his interpretation, there was room for them to interpret the way they were, that there were limitations in it.
Okay, now let me ask a real attorney. What have you read?
So it is not the best drafted contract when it comes to the audit rights. So there are some limitations on the amount of information we can get. I've never seen the situation where they refuse to provide information like this. This is really unusual, regardless of what the contract says, because at some point you typically want to get more business and you don't do that. So, we could try to craft some arguments, depends on how aggressive you want to get with this, but it's not as clear as I would like it to be. The second thing that, as I looked at the contract, was sometimes when you have a company that's acquired, there's a requirement that, in our case, that we would have to approve the continuation of the contract. Unfortunately, in this case, there's a clause that says if they are taken over by another firm, that they don't have to have our consent. So that locks us into this contract through the end of the term, which is 2026, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
26. Yeah.
In this contract, we don't have the ability to give them notice and walk away, like we do in every other contract that I know of?
No, it does not. Not
There
just
is a bailout?
without cause, no.
Why would we do any of that?
Would this be cause?
Well, they'd have to violate the agreement, right? So the problem is that language doesn't look like they're technically violating the agreement because it's not as broad of a right to audit as we would like. So, we could maybe become more aggressive if you want to become more aggressive and push this issue and see how they respond. I don't have any problem with that at all. But, it's, again, unless we do that, we're probably locked in until 2026. We have to decide.
I'm not a believer in pulling a smoking gun, but if you're of the opinion that we're locked in, then I don't see being more aggressive. If there's wiggle room to what you're reading and we could be aggressive, then I would be in favor of that.
Let me go back and read it again. I had read the opinion from prior counsel that I understood his argument. I don't have any reason to think it was incorrect. But I'll go back and I'll read it one more time. Let's make sure.
Thank you. So basically, this audit is, that you're going to tell us you couldn't audit anything?
Well, no, but there were a number of, I would say the most significant limitation dealt with the thing at the end of the day, they're in demonstrating, as was referred to earlier by previous speaker, the value what they're providing to you. In other words, the underlying data for the annual report, we were giving nothing for. We audited other things, but that's a big limitation in terms of.
Huge.
Yeah, yes, yes.
I thought you had mentioned, and I thought it was you, but I'm not 100% sure, that 2026 wasn't in my mind. I thought we had the opportunity to go out potentially earlier than that.
So we would be able to start the process earlier, so that at the end, we're ready to take over.
Okay.
A replacement
Got it.
potentially, but
Okay, Thank you for clarifying, because I'm like, 2026, I don't remember that. I remember we were locked, but I didn't remember for how long.
Going out the bid in 2025. Is that what you're thinking?
Do we have to be exclusive? Like, could we hire, could we contract a secondary who we just use more?
That's smart.
There,
And give them one office, you know, and give the others the.
it's a very
more space.
complicated answer.
But I like that thinking.
I do too.
I don't know.
So
Just
if-
freeze them out.
Just
Right.
freeze them out. I like that a lot.
Well, if we went out for no, because they know they're locked until 2026, because I was
But
going to say.
they're paid for services, though. So they're paid for
Right.
how many patients come in.
Yes.
It's a flat fee. The operation of the facility is a flat fee. So if we had 1,000 people go in there, it would be the same as if one person went in. That's why we
Oh.
don't drive utilization.
So that won't work. So no
So then we're
freeze them
basically
out.
just paying for two people.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Well, no, we're maxed out. At Eustis, we're at almost 98% utilization. And we're actually having to add office space for another provider so that we can get people in. Kathy was just saying back here, they can't get in. So we're working through those difficulties because no matter what, we have to maintain what we're offering, regardless of who's doing it currently.
Well, and I think that would be beneficial information. Are they giving adequate care? Are people happy with the care that they're receiving?
We just did a big survey on that, so we do have some data that we
Okay.
can talk about in the insurance committee.
Okay.
Now, what was really surprising, though, because I thought everybody was going to be completely dissatisfied, and when we talked about this a couple of years ago, is that there was a surprising level of satisfaction. However, there are some situations of maybe the care was not great, and so could we use any of those
Right.
individual situations to justify
Termination.
termination of a contract?
So I worked through a lot of that to try to rise to that level of breach.
he needs to come to the
and
mic.
There were not
Oh,
specific enough KPIs in the contract to say this is what you must do or else. It was, there's a lot of gray area.
But to give us a hint, what does that data show? I know you haven't presented it to the insurance committee, but are people basically satisfied or not?
So, and it was one of our own internal problems we're gonna work on. The survey, the way it was asked, didn't really break out, did you like who was running the facility? It was, did you like the facility? So,
And what was the answer to that?
yes, it was like 90% satisfaction with the fact that they have that available to them, but we can always do better.
Yeah, I think I would answer those questions differently. Yes, I like being able to go to the facility, but I wasn't satisfied that I still walked out.
Can't get in at certain times.
Right.
Okay.
Or that you're being really sneaky about where your money is?
Yeah. Sorry.
Can we continue?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the background section, just to give you guys some context. Again, I'm not going to I'll just, if you have any questions on that, I did put in the whole, since it was a big piece of, we've been talking about, this is the entire, or almost all of it, this most germane of the right to audit clause, and we just talked about that. So that's, I just put that whole thing in there for your reference. Just to emphasize that, it does talk about, which we did completely audit, a big chunk of what they do is they do submit invoices every month. And we did audit all those, and we just had a few items on that we addressed in the observation matrix. So those are one of the items we're able to audit. Even then, though, there's a limitation, since we've already talking about addressing that, I'll not go into detail, you've already addressed that, but there's a limitation even in that, and you'll see it in the finding itself, but. And just to hit one sentence on that, since I did underline it here, about midway down in the audit procedure on that page, like the last 7 or 8 lines, it says, for purposes of determining the proper amounts payable under the provision of this agreement, the right of the client to audit in this Article 5 shall be limited to verifying time and material supplied to client and shall not include the right to audit, review underlying wage or cost information, nor auditing the composition of any specified percent, fixed rate, or fixed fee referred to in this agreement. Now, interestingly, they did it on providing it because just to getting paid in the normal course of business, accounts payable is saying you have to provide support. So they did that, even though they possibly could have, and I'm not an attorney here, attorney decided that, possibly could have hid behind that clause and not even provided support for that. At any rate, okay. Here's our approach. This is we give a lot of detail. These are all the things that we propose as far as laying out what our process would be, how would we test, identified in the detailed, in the understanding the documents process, that's where we go through and get a handle on the agreement itself. We talk with Director of Risk Management, we talk to Representative Premise Health. We go through and identify all what we understand and see as being the most significant, the higher risk key contract metrics that we wanted to verify and audit or test for compliance. As you can see, there are a number of things. We looked at a lot here. Some cases attempted to look at a lot. We were rebuffed. So you have a whole detail of that. Okay. Any questions on just our approach? And here's the big observations. The first one, here we've listed all the items, at least to us, were the most significant in terms of being told that it was outside the scope, and we listed all those items there for you. And you already talked about this as a board, about taking action, how you want to take action. Of course, that's up to you. We have our suggestions here. As far as, essentially, the summary is you want, as full and broad audit rights as possible. You shouldn't have anything.
Restricted.
Yeah, you shouldn't be restricted. And like, as already has been said, and in my experience, I can echo that. In terms of my experience, I've never run into that where someone has not been, even if the contract or the right to audit clause, even if it could have been broader, I've never had anyone say, we're not going to provide that, because it was, they saw this as a, transparency, they want to do business with you. So we were very, very surprised as well. And just to echo that, in my experience, that's rare. I wanted to one time, and it was a contractor situation, and they were saying they already been audited, they don't want to be audited again, but I never run into this otherwise. You have Man's response there.
Excuse me one second.
Sure.
So these clinics are not new to us. And I don't remember in my now 12 years on the board, did we audit them before, or we audited
I
them?
did.
But we didn't hire you?
Correct.
This is the first time with you?
Correct.
Right, but it was a
Okay,
different vendor. When he
Carrier.
audited it, it was a different vendor.
Carrier.
But Carrier got bought by these people?
Now it's a new vendor.
It's a whole new vendor?
Correct.
And the other folks, were they transparent with you?
Yes.
This is so weird.
Yeah, we had no issues with Care Here. It's all with the Premise folks.
Care Here.
Care Here, yeah, no issues with
I thought you
them.
were saying Carrier.
Yeah.
which is very-
Yeah, Care Here, the only, I remember when they were going with industry standard data, it was kind of like, well, that doesn't help me a lot, because how do you derive the industry, this is industry, you know what I'm saying? But other than that, I think they gave me the detail behind a lot of the other.
With basically the same
numbers.
contract that,
Yeah, I think it's the same,
I believe that they were acquired by Premises Health.
yes.
And so this contract, just because of the clause about successors, assigned.
Care Here got acquired by?
Yeah, the company we had was acquired by Premises Health. So I'm assuming that when the old people were in charge, it wasn't an issue, and then Premises Health came in, and they must have a different philosophy.
But empirically, we have a relationship where they always provided it until now.
They provided it since 2021, was the original agreement, August 1st, 2021, with Care Here, and then Premises Health acquired Care Here.
And so empirically, we have them performing and providing us information. Now they're saying no.
Right.
There we're going back to the contract.
Right.
And yet, we have a pattern where they have provided it.
Yeah, before they were acquired by a different group, so I'm assuming they're under different management now than the original folks, but.
But they wouldn't, even, I guess what I'm trying to sort out is a way to be more aggressive.
Yeah.
If you have an organization that has been performing, even though the language may or may not be ambiguous.
Yeah.
Sounds like it is, but they did what we asked. Now they've been acquired, but they still have an obligation to, I'm sure they didn't change every person.
Yeah, so that's actually.
Am I clear?
Yeah, I understand. There's a legal concept called estoppel, where if you've been doing something for a long time, you can't later say, well, we're not going to do it because we technically don't have to, and you say, well, you've been doing it forever. It doesn't work real well when there's been an acquisition by somebody else, because it wasn't them that did that before. It was the company they acquired, so it's
But
hard.
when they bought it, they knew what the other company was doing.
They might have or they might not have. I don't know.
I say they did.
Put you on the stand first.
Yeah, you're hired.
Any questions on this one?
No, beat that one to death.
This one is just give more detail related to this. One of the things we're saying here, because of the nature of the licenses and the qualifications being so important, since these are, professionals, this is actually, on the one hand, Premise wasn't willing to provide information to us as part of the audit. And then also, though, we're recommending that, which we've already addressed really in observation one, here we're saying management should be proactive and verifying it themselves. They do that on a regular, we said on at least an annual basis, and I think if you look at the response, I'm trying to read that far away. That they're going to look at them themselves as well and make sure that they do verify. In other words, not be reactive but proactive in this case, in terms of the licensing. Questions on that? Three, again, this is talked about the limitations in the reporting. In this case, this was, there were certain metrics specified in the contract that weren't being provided as part of the reporting. And so management was aware of this and talking to them and had made, and you can see their response. Again, just, why? I don't know. I don't have a reason for you.
What level did you go to try and get them to provide information?
What level?
Yeah. Like, was it a local person you're talking to?
Well, the person, they said this was their representative, this is who you're going to deal with, and that's who we dealt with. They were the one assigned to the count, and they're the ones that, in fact, they're the ones that came back. When we first started out, we had to get do a confidentiality agreement, which we did, and they still didn't provide us with their information. Then they came back and said, well, that's outside the right to audit clause. And this is the person, and the person we interact, this was the person assigned that they said, this is our contact. We didn't really.
What was their title?
I don't know, I have to go back to the work papers, I don't remember that offhand. I don't know if Rob remembers. Yeah, I can go back and find out that for you, I could communicate that back to you, like who
I think you need
the
to
name and
communicate
title
that to
was.
our attorney. Because if we've got a Class C person making these decisions, maybe we should have ramped it up and gone higher to get information.
I think we might want to ask Rob in terms of that regard.
Yeah, so when Mr. Burley was encountering issues, I ran it up the chain on their side, to whatever level in Tennessee, and the answer came back down through the channels.
I think it's very important to understand the title of whoever the highest person said no. I think we need to get that to our attorney as soon as possible.
Okay, sure. And then finally, this is the area where actually we were provided, there was only a couple of items, and they were able to, they're requesting this, that there was the COI, certificate of insurance, weren't provided with some of the invoices. And then the other thing, and it goes back to the right to audit clause, they didn't provide any payroll rates, payroll support, so we don't know, how do we know that, what they're billing as far as those folks were really being paid that amount? We don't know. And again, with the right to audit clause, they've already said specifically they don't have to provide that information, and they didn't, so.
Why would they not want to provide that information? So but the reason I ask, it seems obvious, right? But I heard Mr. Orr say that we have a fixed cost. Is it billed to, is it what they're billing to insurance?
Well, the piece-
obviously it makes it questionable, but I'm just wondering,
What's the reason?
Well, the piece there, the reimbursable stuff is not fixed, that's based upon
Right.
reimbursement.
okay.
He's talking about the services.
Reimbursement from insurance or from us, from both?
We pay for this.
Okay. But when I
for
looked through,
costs.
and I looked through all these graphs very briefly, nothing stood out to me as like a red flag. Do you know what I'm saying, as far as our
Well-
costs go?
No, we keep a pretty,
Who knows? Are they real numbers? That's a good question.
Right.
we don't pay anything.
We don't know.
So they're not substantiating the data they're giving us, or letting us substantiate the data they're giving us. Okay. But we know how much we've spent. We know internally how much we've spent.
Because we
Does
do a
it-
lot of pass-through billing.
Does it- Does it match?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We won't pay anything that doesn't match up to what we're buying.
It's just interesting.
So it comes back to, like you said, they're saying this is what you're getting, this is
But is
their
it?
wonderful statistics, but they haven't given us underlying data as the auditors that you've engaged just to verify that. So it could be fine, but when you don't provide the underlying data, then you're going to be,
Yeah, it could be completely clean, but it
Yeah.
certainly gives us reason to
It does.
assess. That's terrible for a business relationship.
right.
That's
and
all
I
I'm
think-
saying.
Right. And that's the right question. I mean, that's what you would ask
Yeah,
them.
those
Why?
are fluff, you gotta be careful, those might be fluff numbers, is what I would say.
Yeah,
I
why?
just think it's interesting for the fluff numbers piece. Like, that is interesting, because we're being billed. We're making payments. The payments match what they provided. So then where could there be potential for, like, that's interesting to me. I know it's a different conversation.
Fluff is
It's-
making yourself look good,
Right, it's a problem.
yeah. And
It's
that's
still,
problematic.
it's still a performance metric since it's a fixed cost. If it turns out they're performing poorly,
Right.
you're not going to want to continue.
That would be a cause.
Right. That would be a cause.
That would be a cause for the attorney to negate the contract.
Oh, cause, yes, yeah. And
Thank you.
That may be why you don't want to supply underlying data.
Yeah,
Maybe,
Maybe.
maybe.
so that concludes my report.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
You certainly gave us something to discuss.
Yeah.
Terrible report, but,
That's why I thought we should have flipped it around maybe, and a good note for you.
yeah, like I have nothing to say, but.
Yeah.
I went with the oldest report
I was
first.
trying to say, Tom, let's switch that around. They're not going to, doesn't matter what, they're not going to be happy. I get it. Hopefully it's nothing.
We appreciate you, and I would say as a wrap-up, those things that were mentioned that we would like to see our attorney be provided for, or provided with, we would ask that those happen with all due haste. Okay? Moving right along, sir.
Great. Holly, what audit's next? Is it the,
It would be standard operating procedures.
okay. Get the PowerPoint presentation for the standard operating procedures, please. My presentations are brief. I try to keep it short. We've been talking about standard operating procedures, or I have, excuse me. I've been talking about standard operating procedures for quite some time. It's been dialogues individually with each of you in my meetings because it comes up in the audit reports frequently, I guess is the best way to put it. And I was out on doing, while I was pulling the report together, I was trying to figure out a way to present the policies over procedures, and as well as processes. And I came across this graph, and I put down where I got the graph from to give credit where credit's due. And to me, it shows exactly what I'm trying to convey, and I think a lot of people it was kind of a gray area and weren't kind of getting what I was saying. And it's not the policies, I think, that anybody's not understanding. The policies are derived from the board, and they drive the general, the 30,000-foot view of how the school board would like things to go. But then there's that next level, which is the processes. In a lot of cases, that's where I think the gray area came in, and saying that we do have, Tom, we do have standard operating procedures. But when I got the books on that they were really the processes. They were processes for the school district to do. And where the processes to the standard operating procedures go is, to me, is always the how to do something. And that's where I was looking for standard operating procedures. And I always use accounts payable because you get an invoice in, right? And sometimes it comes email, very little time does it come, but occasionally it comes by mail or from a school or something like that. So that's part of a process, and somebody's getting that, and then they have to do something with it. And if it doesn't have something that it requires, maybe a purchase order, then it has to do, there's a step for that. So standard operating procedures are that step-by-step that the accounts payable person is doing. The process in general is how we process an invoice, right, to get it paid. So that, to me, is the distinction between the two. So you can be talking about the process, or you can be talking about the procedures on how to get that checkout, which is there's actual steps that have to be done and verifications have to be done. Yes, no questions. Does it have this? Does it have that? No. If it doesn't, well, then it has to go over here or it has to go back to the person and I need this backup support. I need the PO. I need additional information. I need, to be able to make the, to enter it in for payment.
But
So
in that analogy, are you saying there should be an SOP for that exact scenario? Because that sounds like a process to me.
what? There is the process
The
for
whole thing
accounts
that you're
payable,
talking about.
but there's the process for the step-by-step that the person does. There's a process.
What I'm asking is, are you asking that there be an SOP for that clerk?
Yes.
That's what you're asking.
So when I audit that clerk to see if they're doing their job properly, that I can see what exactly are they doing. I don't know what they're doing unless I have that step-by-step. And a lot of times, that's when I sit down and I develop that. Does that make sense? And that's where,
But without calling it an SOP, I would assume that that clerk is taught and there's a written instructions on how they, if the invoice comes in this way, you handle it this way. If it's rejected, it goes back this way.
Right.
I'm assuming that's written down.
and what I would
And
find out
just
is
change the title?
it's
Is that what you're
different
asking?
depending on where you go. It could be, like you said, it could be written down, it could just be taught. It could come from, well, we use guidebooks, manuals, we use timelines, we use, you know what I'm saying, different sources
But-
of information.
but Is it just semantics that you're concerned about? Because if they have that process, and you're wanting it to be called one thing, and maybe Mr. Ward calls it how to process.
It's not semantics because it should all look relatively the same in general.
But there's a lot of different jobs, so you're gonna.
Sure.
I don't see how you discipline them all to look the same.
Well, I don't necessarily want them exactly the same if, I'm not, in your mind, if you're looking for a regimen, I'm looking, when I go in, I just say, do you have standard operating procedures for how you do X, Y, Z?
If I hand you, I'm the clerk that you're asking,
Mm-hmm.
and I hand you, here's what I was told, and on there, to your example,
Mm-hmm.
is the accounts payable invoice. And it is, if this happens, it goes this way, if that happens, I think you did a kind of a little chart in here.
Yep.
Wouldn't that be the same, though? I'm trying to understand exactly.
But what if the next person I go to gives me something completely different? Then it's not the same.
Everybody's doing bookkeeping should have the same.
But that's where you find the differences, and that's exactly what I'm saying. is
So you're saying every
I
bookkeeper
find
does
something,
not?
correct, I'll find something different from bookkeeper to bookkeeper. Some create their own, some were creating their own.
Because they created their own?
Because there wasn't anything,
Okay.
because there wasn't something. And then they were sharing, sometimes they would share it with others, and then they would create something. So I just standardize, if that's appropriate to say. That's what I was looking for. Actually, I would have been happy with if they gave me anything initially.
Okay, I thought you said they did give you stuff.
In some cases, they do give me stuff. In some cases, they don't. And if they don't have anything, like when I did cell phones, when I went over and sat down with Sonia, I think is the name, I documented. She told me everything she did, so I documented that. I wrote that down. She didn't have anything. I wrote everything down, and then I created the flow maps for those. To me, if somebody gave me a flow map, I would be happy with that. That would be another way to document. So, I mean, you could have many forms of documentation for standard operating procedures. The question is why would we not want to standardize so that we're all talking the same thing? Does that make sense? So the process is.
There should be a document that tells an employee when they come on board what to do.
Yes.
I guess I'm just getting hung up on that different schools do things differently because every one of them's independent with their own administrators.
Correct.
And that when you come to work at Lake Minneola High School, you're not going to be a rubber stamp as though you were at Rhymes Elementary.
Mm-hmm.
Is that-
And when I was doing the school outs, I might sit with the data entry clerk and ask for her procedures. And they would be a lot driven by what is Skyward, what documentation Skyward had. However, it's really how to do it in the system versus, when I get the piece of paper. And there might be steps you have to do and then get them into the system. Does that make sense? Because if there's something missing, where do I go to get that information? How do I put it in the system? And if I'm lacking information, they might just go ahead and skip it. Well, the system wants that information.
And I wonder if there's some things that should be, and then some things that do allow for some wiggle room based on the site. Like you would think that if you're taking invoice, that would be the same across the district.
Well, I mean, just to your credit and point, that I actually referred a parent to soon-to-be Dr. Luke because of this focus thing, and that she was getting different information from different people at the school. So,
Well, I go back to the transportation thing that we talked about a little bit ago with the different schools doing different things to meet the needs of the boosters or no boosters, or we're driving, or we're taking a bus, or we're taking a van, or we're like, there are some things that are variants.
that I think fit in an SOP. Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
I think there's room. I think what you're really saying is we need, whether it's really a true SOP or if it's a job description that tells them how to perform their job, that I see the merit of.
Yeah,
More
there's.
than writing an SOP for everything.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of two distinctions. Things done at the district office aren't as decentralized, they're centralized. But when you're talking about the schools, it's very decentralized. And you go from school to school, you find different things. Some are similar, some are not, and some people have created their own for, because it's kind of I always say, standard operating procedures cover 80% of what you do, maybe even 90% in some cases, like accounts payable. But there are some things that are one-off, and I think even Scott says, well, you can't do a standard and I agree, you cannot do a standard operating procedure for every little thing that could possibly happen today.
Right.
I think the biggest conversation difference is when you're talking about an internal account, you're talking about the district funds. The district funds are very documented, there's manuals, there's all kinds of stuff. If they don't put it in Skyward right, it doesn't go anywhere, period. Most of the controls are built into the system. Same thing with the internal account part of Skyward too. Most of the controls are built into the system, so when you get in, you can't get too far off without screwing up. I'm sitting here looking at our internal manual now. We've got a manual that goes through mid-level conversation about what you have to do and how you do things. There's not a step-by-step SOP, but there is a manual that's available to everybody.
But Mr. Mock, you've said that his department has their.
Well, I guess
I feel like
I'm
I've heard you
confused
say
because the example was putting in a PO or putting in an
Sure.
invoice. So again, he says we're covered, but then he uses us as the example, so
Yeah.
maybe that's.
Well, that's why I was just talking about centralized versus decentralized.
I thought I'd heard you say before that department was very standardized.
Yeah, they have a lot of theirs, and you were even using some AI software to
Sure.
enhance what you already have.
For training. We
So-
do.
And more
extensive-
standardize it too.
We train the new bookkeepers when they come in. We have two bookkeepers that provide support to all the bookkeepers constantly. We have annual and semi-annual bookkeeper meetings.
Do we do the same type of, what you're talking about for our athletic directors?
No.
Okay,
Well,
that's,
no,
like, that's what
I
I'm,
take that back.
that's, I think, for.
I take that back.
We have meetings.
They have meetings, yes, they have, and they even meet maybe monthly, and they cover topics and stuff. But where we run into problems is when people don't show up, and I'm sure that's the same thing with them. If they don't have their athletic people show up, they don't receive the training that they need.
Or the challenge would be, what if that position turns over from year to year? Now you get somebody new who comes in, they haven't had the benefit of these last 10 meetings, and how would they know, oh, this is a procedure or an expectation of the district that I do this? I mean, it seems like, yes, there are going to be some nuances that are going to vary from site to site, but there are also going to be some procedures that we're going to be interested in as a district that are going to be consistent from place to place, or that it wouldn't depend, it wouldn't matter whether you're at Rhymes or Eastridge High School, like, what does a bus driver do if a kid gets on the wrong bus and you notice it's in the middle of the afternoon? Are they all trained to figure out how to respond to that situation? Or
And don't cross in, I mean, sometimes you can cross over into processes very easily. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But and I tried to point that out in the report, because some things, are handled like media. It's not, every day, I don't think a principal is handling media. I mean, you don't have the media contacting the school every day, but let's say today the media contacts them, well, we have a process, and I'm sure Ms. Owens will tell us that. We have a process that the principals are supposed to follow, that she's probably provided them to do. But that's a process. It's not a standard, it's not, she knows the standard operating procedures. Once we get the media contact, then she goes into this, and this.
So if somebody from the media, or even just maybe an average citizen, reaches out to a teacher and says, I have a public records request, there's a set of
Then we
procedures
should
somebody
have
needs to
standard
follow.
operating procedures, right.
And so now, do those teachers know what that procedure would be?
Right. We have a process, the process should be this, and then if whoever that comes to, the standard operating procedures are, you
Yes.
do this, and this. And they should be able to go out and get that. That's where I want to see it be made available on Google, because if someone says, well, how do I do this standard operating, or this record request? Well, they could go out and search and find, right, here's the standard operating procedures for record requests.
Did you come up with this, or is this is that chart on how to handle it?
Yeah, that's one of my flow charts.
See, like, this makes some sense to me, that you would be able to just look at it rather than read in an SOP, that if I'm a new clerk, boom, this tells me, like,
Yeah, well, you and well, that's because I'm visual. I agree. I'm a visual person, and to me, that makes so much sense to me.
yeah,
It's-
100%.
That's why I do that, because it makes sense to me, and that's how I figure things out.
And then we're already obviously on the same page, because I would rather look at this than go.
But not
through-
everyone does their SOPs that way, but to me, that's perfectly good.
No, but this is an example then of an SOP to you.
But you could take that and write that out into a standard operating procedure.
Same process. It says process on the top.
But it is a procedure on how to get it.
But it's a
processed.
step-by-step. It's the process, but it's the standard operating procedures for that process.
I think,
But it's the individual doing that.
I think the level of detail is maybe dependent on what the situation might be, right? And some of these.
Absolutely.
Some of these would be appropriate to perhaps be a flow chart. Some things might need a little more verbiage associated with those. Yeah, I think it's, granted, I worked for an organization that was very particular on its procedures and ensured consistency in formatting and so on and so forth. And I recognize that we are full of many different departments who have, well, you've got this manual already in existence. Why are you going to, reinvent the wheel, so to speak?
They got, and that's what I pointed out in the
Yeah.
report, is the different things that I saw along the way, sitting down with the directors, and they would show me what they had. Some were using manuals, some were using state statutes to guide them in what they did. It's just, to me, that's the process. They were showing me what the process was.
I have to wonder if some of our challenge maybe is the lack of a central organizational system for this. That, for instance, if I'm a teacher and I'm planning a field trip, is somebody handing me the field trip manual or so that I know to follow all this? Or
The steps to do,
Right.
to make sure
Or-
your field trips.
Because I've worked
Yes.
alongside
Right.
teachers who have planned field trips not knowing there was a field trip manual.
Right.
And so, and
And that's why I was
That
saying,
happens, right?
if it's made available online, like the policies.
That's
I mean,
right.
if you said, if I said I didn't know there was a policy on it, you say, Tom, it's online. Why can't you go out
That's
and
right.
find it?
right.
But if you said, there's a field trip and it's not available online, easily accessible, then, what's your counter to that? It's like, well, so-and-so has it. Well, I didn't know so-and-so had it.
So do we have a field trip?
Yes.
There is such a manual.
So
Is it
where does this
online?
manual live? That was my question.
With the bookkeeper.
So the bookkeeper to each school has this attachment B.
It is
procedures
my
manual.
experience that the bookkeeper has it. She gives it to the grade level chair or.
See, my
whoever.
recommendation is we have a intranet website, and everything should be available there. Unless it's a sensitive,
online.
and I'm
then
obviously
but
jumping ahead, unless it's a sensible,
So don't they have a presentation?
where it's, where it's safety, security, IT, or finance that doesn't need to be,
So
readily
maybe
available to
We don't
everyone.
write anything, we just have to make it accessible,
So,
is what you're saying.
so I think one step of this is compiling everything into the right place and providing
Yep.
the access to the people who need it, right?
Yep.
So same thing at Disney.
Yep.
There were,
That's pointed
there
out.
were various procedures that, well, you have no reason to have these procedures, and so you wouldn't have access to those, right? So
Correct.
Similarly, maybe a lot of the safety security has to do that. Me as a teacher, well, goodness, I wouldn't really care how POs are processed, so I don't need access to that, right?
But they could be
people-
out there.
I do.
They
right.
could be out there, you just wouldn't be accessing them.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of policies out there that people don't need to access every day, but there are particular ones that people should be looking at.
Yeah, I guess, I'm, part of my inquiry on this is that, we could brainstorm all sorts of scenarios, and part of me wonders, have people have the training on what to do in that sort of scenario? In the absence of necessarily having access to the procedures, you don't know, right? Now, let's say we're both bus driver trainers, right? And I go out and I'm going to train some new bus drivers, and Stephanie's going to go out and train a bunch of bus drivers. We might not have even trained the same procedures, or we might not have covered all the same content. So my
Correct.
people know what to do, but her people, they don't know what to do because she's
You-
like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So having solid procedures leads to solid training materials, right? And so
But we don't know that they do, because
We don't know.
I would almost guarantee you, excuse me, we don't know because we're just you and me.
That's right.
But I guarantee that there is a checklist for bus drivers to
Right.
get.
That's what-
And testing their competencies. I'll guarantee that exists.
But does it cover what to do if a kid gets on the wrong bus in the afternoon? Does it cover what to do if a kindergartner
routes, yep, I bet you-
But then the other point is you were saying is accessibility, and in Mr. Mathias's case, maybe I can't see that checklist, and how do I know that I didn't get training on each
You're a
every?
trainer.
No,
You're a
no,
trainer.
you're the trainer, I'm the person getting trained. I don't know that you
But can we
checked
go back to
everything
the,
off.
I've been to trainings, I've given trainings before, and then I go
Bus
back
driving
and,
training?
no curriculum training.
It was a hypothetical example. I haven't read their documentation, all
Hypothetical
right? I
example,
have not
but
read the
listen, how many trainings have you been to or delivered, then you go back and they're like, oh, I've never heard that before, and you're like, oh, yeah, I said it the last time I was
That's
here,
right,
but
right.
let me say it again, and again, and again, right? So if there was an accessible point, it would help me to go back and refresh if I didn't know it was available. I do feel like we
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of the things that you're suggesting, it's just a matter of
That's what I think.
teaching people to go back and get it, or go back and revisit.
Trevor's not gonna say, oh, there's a child on the wrong bus. Let me access
No.
Google and go to this document. Let me read while I'm sitting.
No, they should know that already. That should have been in
Hopefully
their
they'll call
training.
somebody.
And the route
Yeah.
manager will tell them exactly
Call your
what they need.
supervisor.
Yeah, and it's like an accounts payable person process an invoice, they're not gonna walk through, yeah, they're gonna know. It's when you come across something you don't know that you go back and read your standard operating procedures for how. But in most cases, hopefully the training got you through that.
Hopefully it did, but then how do you hold that person accountable? So let's say there's a procedure, we've developed it. Now this person doesn't use that procedure. Now this kid gets lost, who knows what, maybe something happens to that kid. Parent comes back and says, where's my kid? Oh, they got kidnapped. Okay, well, let's go back to the procedure. Why did this bus driver not follow the procedure as written?
Correct.
And well, the bus driver's like, well, I don't know, and so then I think there's a certain responsibility of the district then that falls on us of, okay, who's responsible here? It's this bus driver who didn't follow the procedure, but if you don't have that documented, and once again, this is a hypothetical because this one might be documented, but, so I've had a number of kids, 5, right? So I've had the experience of experiencing things.
Fertile.
From a variety of different schools, and I know things have been done differently. For instance, if a kid is potentially being identified for maybe needing tier 2 interventions, that process has looked different from school to school, or what the parental notifications
Not
might
at all.
entail in that. Why would that look different from school to school? It shouldn't. So there should be some procedures documented somewhere on that, right?
Yep.
And so if those procedures are documented, then
And I think,
why would it be different?
to me, the standard operating procedures reinforces your training. So if you're reading your SOPs after you get trained, you might read through and say, they didn't cover that in training. Or maybe I need a little bit, I didn't quite understand that. I'm reading down through the SOP and I don't understand exactly what this is. And that, you need to go back and get a little bit more training, so to speak, to make it clear. The only last thing that I would add to all the discussion, because we discussed all 3 out of these 4 points up here from the audit observation, is that I was the only one my job description was the only one that had in it that I had to establish standard operating procedures for my department. I looked at every one of the director positions in the school district, and I was the only one that had that requirement in there. And that would be my only observation from there is, I recommend that all job descriptions that they should have, like I do, because that was the first thing I had to put together, because the first thing I looked for when I came in the department was where are the standard operating, there weren't any, so I started putting that together. So, nobody else is being held accountable for that, so I would recommend that as the job descriptions are updated, that be added to their requirement. So that, other than that, I think we talked about all four of these observations. And overall, I think the benefit in the middle there, the green, I think we get a lot of benefits from well-developed and written standard operating procedures. We get consistency, efficiency, productivity, quality, compliance, knowledge, standardization, safety, and a reduction of errors. So, I mean, that's, I think, in
But
a
again,
nutshell,
we
that's
have
what'll help
those,
us
we
get.
just need them to be more accessible.
Let me give you another example. Can I give you another example? I think this is a great example. I just was sitting here thinking of this. So when I started here, and I think we've had a couple of position changes. I'm talking not as a board member. I'm talking as a math specialist, from a teacher position to the math specialist. I was the first person that was the math specialist for elementary schools in the district. I had no idea what my job description entailed, except to support people at the district or at the school level. So literally, I would call schools. What can I do to come train you? How can I come help with your math standards? I set the tone of that job. When I left that job 3 years later, when I was promoted to a different position, they hired somebody else who literally would come to my office for the next 6 months. What do we do about this? Hey, what is the STEM Bowl? That was a moment of discussion. And that led to me, in my other role, also having to do the STEM Bowl for the next 2 years, right? And I finally had to have a conversation with different administration that if you want this event to continue, we should probably get it established. Now it's established. So this is just, that's an example. Like, I do think we have a lot, but then the data transfer from one system to another, that was never documented. So when it came up, it was almost like we missed it because that person didn't know to do it. And I hadn't written anything about how do we transfer this set of data when the textbook turned over, because there was a textbook, like website protocol. And I'm sure that changes with every adoption. So it's almost, I don't know if that helps. There wasn't an overlap of
Well, and
that.
that helps too when you're the first one in a position.
But
then
we
how do
have
learn
new
from that there?
positions.
Agreed. No,
right?
I'm
Like-
not saying that
right,
doesn't
right,
happen
right.
more often, but
Right.
when you're the first one to do it, it's hard to have the
It's
SOPs.
super hard.
From it when you're building
Well,
a
I didn't
department.
write any because it wasn't in my job description to maybe
Well-
standardize some things,
Or
right?
the particular challenge with this, we have so many positions where there's only like one of them or two of them, and then so when that person leaves, there's nobody else in the district who knows that job.
Right.
And then what? That person's left kind of figuring things out on their own,
Yeah.
and then we're, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
Things don't go well.
I don't know if I'll be here when you're
Yeah.
able to find the new person, but when I leave
Well-
here, I'm comfortable in knowing that there's a standard operating procedure in my department that they could read through
Sure.
and get an idea of how I did the audits.
Sure.
And that'll support what's in obviously electronic, but that'll support what I have in my files. And they may not agree with the steps I do, and they want to change them, but at least they know how I did things, if that makes sense.
It does.
All the way through the risk assessment. Everything on there, I've updated that risk assessment time and time again. Every year that I change something, I immediately, well, not immediately, within a couple months, I probably go in and update it. And I've already reviewed everything to make sure that it's current. So I'm leaving it as I last did it, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
I'd like to say something about the fact that when you came on board, that was in your job description. As a semi-old person, prior to you in that position, Mr. Bolt was here. And the reason for that particular item being listed in the job description was because there was a problem. There was no internal auditor. And there was a problem at one of the schools, one of the elementary schools, where a bookkeeper was involved with some missing funds. So the board at that time decided, I was a principal, that we were going to have that position. And that was one of the things they were concerned about, is that when things like that occurred, there would be some kind of written step-by-step process so that we knew how to investigate, or the person doing the investigation knew how to investigate what had occurred. So I don't think, I don't want you to feel that someone put that in your job description or your department and you were singled out. I think that was a reaction
Okay.
to a problem.
Okay.
And they were trying to solve the problem.
Yeah, I didn't know why it was there and nobody else had it.
That's
but-
why it was there. And time has passed, and we're present. And I think there's a lot of validity on all sides. I think a lot of things that we're talking about out in individual schools, there are processes. There are old standard operating procedures that these processes were developed based on. Now, maybe there's some, your processes are only good as your training. And like you said, there are a lot of human things that occur. People don't come, people don't remember, people have amnesia, but all of those are things that I think we have the infrastructure to support and be able to fix. Granted, there are some things that do need step-by-step instructions. I mean, something like losing someone's child, that's pretty major. But I do.
Hopefully, we have a procedure for that, we just.
Call your supervisor.
We do, and we have a manual. And I think that this is probably, almost like the chicken and the egg. But your work is very valued, and you certainly bring a lot of things for us to think about. So for that, I'm very grateful.
This might lead into the custodial service audit?
Let's hope so.
I think that's a great way for that to go.
Because the physical inventory is going to be quick, but trust me, what
let's
you
move right
just
into it.
said literally reads right into the custodial service audit. If we could bring that one
Okay,
up
take it away.
and jump on that,
So
unless there's another
I guess
question.
one other piece of information or wisdom I gleaned from your report here was also about the timeliness of updating some of these things.
Sure.
Right? When you peruse a lot of these job descriptions, they haven't been updated in more than a decade. Same with some of the procedures. I think the examples of some of your procedures in here were well over a decade old. They would find, I think I'd be hard pressed to believe that some of these procedures haven't been updated or haven't changed in the last 10
Processes
years.
or whatever, yeah.
So I think capturing that is got to be a component of that too.
Yeah. Like I review mine every year. I mean, there's some that I review I don't need to update, but I always seem to find within my review quite a few updates. So, and it surprises me a lot that I changed how I did something. But then I want to reflect it properly, so.
And, I know often statute will direct various processes that
Sure.
we, of course, now have to have developed procedures for, so on and so forth, I guess my nervousness is, okay, so when statutes get developed, how do we execute that
Yeah.
with a developed procedure or process? As the guy who had a federal lawsuit show up on his doorstep, literally, there I'm coming out of the pool answering this, being served with a federal lawsuit. Some of those processes have me of particular concern.
Yeah.
Not only maybe books that are identified externally, but internally, I'd be interested in knowing that. I just know that sometimes it's taken us months to come to conclusions on some books.
Or assignments.
Or what have you, and so, I'd love to, I know I've said this a few times, but I'd really love to see some internal processes for that.
Well, the custodial service audit contains a lot of things that we've just discussed in this standard operating procedures. A lot of turnover in the organization. They do have training, right? They have training for custodial, and they have training for head custodians, right?
Yes.
And do they attend training? Question number one. Not all. There's a language barrier in some cases, right, with the custodial staff. And then we're just not able to find custodial staff, right? We're not able to fill positions across the school district all the time. So that lends to a lot of the results from, some of the results, not all the results, some of the results from the audit. Now, real quick, here's what I reviewed, looking at the custodial training manuals. I looked at the district policies. I looked at the processes and procedures used with the sample of schools that I picked for the audit. And oversight of the proper cleaning procedures and samples of the school district. Now, real quick, we were talking this morning, Mr. Carr and I, about sampling, and the idea behind audit sampling is just to get a representative of the population. I went across school, picked elementary, middle, high schools. I picked new facilities, old facilities, and some that are kind of in the middle as far as age-wise. So I tried to do a representation of the school district. And in my mind, if I picked another 15, I would expect similar results, maybe a little better, maybe a little worse, maybe pretty much the same. But that's the idea of doing an audit sample. So in our discussion this morning was, everybody wants to see the sample. As an auditor, I don't necessarily like to share the sample, because to me, it's a sample. It's not to beat up on anybody, it's just to kind of get an overall view of the custodial services throughout the school district, if that makes sense. I mean, if we want to sit and talk about the 15, we can talk about them, but.
I definitely don't.
But I would not think so, thank you.
But I understand why the person in charge of the schools would like to know which ones so that they could follow up, and, I understand that.
But the idea is to
I understand
improve
that.
overall
Yes.
versus to pick on someone.
I understand.
Does that make sense?
Well, and we don't want them to not,
Yeah.
when you show up, them to be like, oh, they're going to call me
Yeah.
back on these things either, so I understand.
Yeah, well, number one observation is I found out, we're not reading our policies. Number one, the policy 7420 for sanitation and housekeeping requires the performance of a monthly clean campus report. So of course I took that policy, I immediately contacted the principal and said, can you please share with me your monthly clean campus report? Well, I think only 4 shared something with me, and it wasn't called the Clean Campus Report, but at least they sent me something. So only 4 out of 15 were able to share something that's being done on a monthly basis. So that's number one observation. Number two observation, evaluated, I looked at the evaluations. Plant operations does inspections of the schools. And normally they're done on Saturday when, the cleaning's been done and the school's, locked down. So they can get a good view of what was done during the week and the cleaning before the next week starts. Out of the 7 that I looked at, to me, and they don't grade them, which I had, personally, I was like, how can I really determine that? So I kind of listed everything out and I kind of documented it. And to the best of my, and this is me, the best of my determination, I get that 5 out of 7 came in as casual, inattentive. And the others were a little bit better, obviously, the other 2. So to me, the majority came in as like, as the school year, after we do the deep cleans and we're going on down the road, they're letting things like the floor, spots on the floor appear and not clean those up. They're not necessarily dusting all the shelves and on top of and these were the observations from the inspection reports. They're not my observations. So, and I wrote them down here, what I was listing out. And then there were some findings that kind of fell into a little bit on the risk side of things, where chemicals that are not properly mixed, or they have an unapproved chemical on site, which is a product like bleaches, and we don't allow those in the schools. So, and I found that again in 5 of 7. So, this is again of those inspection reports completed that I reviewed. The review of the custodial clean forms and checklists. One of the things I did is from the training materials, they have all the recommended forms that should be completed during a daily, weekly, monthly. So what I did is I didn't list them out. I just asked the head custodian to please send me the daily, weekly, or monthly reports that they were doing at their facility. Please send me those. So they all sent them to me, and I put all the ones from the training materials, and then I'd list what the schools sent me. So to kind of give you an idea how I looked at that. And you can see from here, the restroom maintenance log, I got 1 out of 15, custodial clean procedures, 4 out of 15. So just kind of, nobody was doing all the forms, and I wasn't even 100% sure they had to do all the forms, but, and no school was doing more than 2 of the forms that were listed out here. So to me, that was, going back to the training. Are we properly training our people, and what forms need to be?
Going back to the training, or is it that as we're short-staffed in custodial help.
Yeah, it could be
then we're
both.
saying,
Yeah, it could be both.
we're not going to worry about the paperwork, let's get the job done?
Let's get
Did
the job
anybody
done.
say our school's filthy, or was there any, I mean, did you get any?
Well, if you go back to the
indication that because
inspection
of the job?
reports, they're casual and attentive, basically.
And who did those inspections?
Plant operations, I believe.
District?
Yes, the district, at the district level, yes.
And I think, now, when I was vice chair, so audit committee timeline, I remember there was some sort of custodial report as well, or audit you had done back then too, that identified there were certain areas that were not tended to. So that would certainly go well beyond
Maybe
not submitting a
this-
report.
Maybe this report, he just hadn't had a chance to present it.
Yeah, it was his report. No, this report just got finished.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
I'm
sorry.
going way back to my time as vice chair. So
Trying to remember.
I was there with the audit committee.
trying to remember
I
what
remember you
report.
presenting it in the audit committee. But anyway.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
Okay, I know it's
Yeah,
been a
I was
little while.
looking, yes, at the
So-
inspection, yeah, that was.
And that was not a case of, this form hasn't been done, but truly there are areas that were dirty. Once again, it could be a staffing issue as to why those areas were dirty, or it could be,
Yeah.
I didn't have a procedure, so I didn't know I was supposed to do that.
That was part
or it
of the
was,
audit for
you know.
grounds and plant operations that I did, and that was just looking at that piece of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that came out, that came out from those inspection reports again.
Or it could be, I have way too much way too much square footage to maintain compared to other districts, you know.
But we
I don't know.
do analysis of that every year, but because
But
of
what's the-
staffing, yes, that
Yeah,
could,
I'm just
that could
wondering
happen.
what the reason is. I mean,
Yeah.
you can get an observation, but then,
Yeah,
Why?
we'd have to drill down into
Why?
that, yeah. I didn't drill that far down. I was looking more for the overall, how are we doing overall in our custodial services?
but how do you solve a problem if you don't know the why? I mean, this is great one step to say, okay.
Well, there's a
We see
lot,
that-
the problem is there's a lot of whys that we would have to spend time looking at. There's the language barrier, the staffing, the training. So, I mean, that would be an audit all itself we could look at. And like you said, maybe square footage, maybe how it's all distributed, and so that would almost be an audit in itself too. So, and I understand,
I
you,
guess that's
and
what
that
I
happens
thought.
from our discussions here, as you guys drill into, and it becomes like a separate, why didn't you look at that? And it's like, well,
Yeah, I guess I thought that would have been included in such a thing like this.
well, it wasn't part of the objectives or the scope of the review, but that's, I know what you're saying, I mean,
Because you get information, but then it's just not enough to solve the problem, right?
Well, I think that goes back to what schools were sampled. I mean, if these reports were given to the people that we have them on, then we might be able to get those answers, especially if this audit didn't, if that wasn't the scope of this audit. I do think that's important. I mean, I think it's important to know what 2 schools of the 7, have good attention to the things that need to be cleaned. And some of that responsibility has to be on the administration of the school.
correct. And
But
that-
they can't do it if they don't know. Now, granted, they should know. And having sat in their seat, I'm not sure why they don't know. I'm not sure why you're getting such low numbers on the reports, because someone at the school is responsible for collecting those reports. And someone at the schools knows whether or not they're shorthanded.
But nobody was doing a clean campus report. I got some other report, I kind of gave them credit just because they gave me something, it's kind of like
Well,
the
then,
term, you
I'm
turn
going to
in
be
a
honest
paper, I
with
gave you
you.
credit.
The term clean campus report is not a familiar term to me, so I don't know what that is.
But it's in our policy.
Okay, but what I'm saying to you is, I received reports all the time from my custodians that told me about
Mm-hmm.
the cleanliness of the school. I don't recall one that was called Clean Campus.
Yeah, I couldn't find one either, so
Oh,
just,
okay.
that's as a point, I could not find something called.
Is that something that came from Neola? They just,
I
Wonder.
that's a
I don't
Neola
know.
name?
It,
So-
Mr. Mathias, it is.
It is?
It's something nobody caught. But as an auditor, I look at, that's the policy that you all have approved.
Well, and to the point of the why, I feel like the administration, that's
Yeah,
where.
that's their
I agree.
responsibility.
I agree. We had that discussion, just FYI, we had that discussion that the schools that are doing better is because the administration gives it a higher level of.
If it's important to the principal.
Correct.
Or whoever's delegated to take care of it.
But I think what we're trying to do is build a process that
Yeah.
it becomes a higher level of responsibility, even if they're not as attentive, that Clean Campus report drives that. I think.
Whatever
I
that
think
is.
that's what we're trying to do, is build a process that will helpfully get us over these instead of deep, smooth things out.
This is a case where I think if you're in the field and we have our area directors, and that if cleanliness is important, this is one that you walk through instead of saying, adding one more thing to somebody's plate about sending a form. And I don't even know who you're sending the form to, by the way, but you can walk around and go on a campus walk, y'all do those, right? And go, your bathrooms don't have toilet paper, or whatever.
It's just messy.
There's grease on the doorknobs. I
There's
don't know.
spots on the floor.
Spots on the floor.
Do it all the time.
And through those walkthroughs, rather than submitting forms and all this other business, I don't think we put one more task on an employee in our schools.
And we
That's
revise
where
the
building
policy.
Well, I'm not asking any new tasks, we're just
This
asking
is
them to
not
do
critiquing-
the tasks
excuse me,
that are
Tom. Let
required.
me make sure, this is not critiquing. You
No, no.
You're bringing light to a situation.
Yeah, I'm just-
But then as a board member, I'm saying, I really do appreciate, and that's one way to control it, is with
Mm-hmm.
forms. I'm just saying, I think a walkthrough of a campus and pointing out deficiencies would be much more effective than submitting a form every week. That's all I'm saying.
So then the training material needs to be reviewed to be
100% of
streamlined.
that part.
Yeah.
100%.
Because alls I'm looking at is what we're asking them to do and
Right.
finding out it's not being done. If that's, I mean, if I can be as clear as that on the audit report, that's exactly
That was my
what the audit
takeaway.
report is pointing out, is like, this is what you're supposed to do and you're not doing it. And that's all the audit report basically is saying, if I had
Well,
to
it did
drill
come
it
up
down
with some
into its
forms.
basics.
So, good.
Okay,
Perfect.
that's
Okay.
really it. Okay, I think the last one was the inventory, real quick.
Yes.
Please.
Inventories, I'm only doing, or as the board requested, not doing them each year. I was initially doing them, but I'd like to say, just as a recap, I mean, there were no issues found, but to me, I can remember day one doing the inventories, and it's night and day out there, folks. I mean, in my mind, my background and experience from the wholesale distributor, I had a lot of experience doing inventories. We have cleaned them up, we have straightened them up, and it is a lot easier to do and take an inventory. And for that reason, you get results that are like this. I'll just jump, no issues, no issues, no issues, no issues.
Outstanding.
This is
So,
great. This is, yeah.
Just
that's awesome.
FYI, I mean, but the hats off to Mr. Carr and his team. I mean, they've taken the audit recommendations over the year, and I know Mr. Mathias, I can still remember this. Mr. Mathias didn't like it when I said it's going to take a couple years to clean these up. I remember you looking at me going, but it does. It takes a while to clean up these inventories. But I think it's an ongoing thing, but they're definitely where they need to be today, and it's not as hard to maintain them. But it's an everyday job to get stuff out of your warehouse that doesn't belong there, that's not being used. So with that, thank you.
Great reports.
Those are my last inventory reports for y'all. Mr. Brolin's just doing the ACA, the Aurelia Coal Construction Audit. We're doing the medical claims audit. Those probably will not get done before I leave, but I'll be handing those off if we find someone to replace me. If not, I'll give them to Mr. Ward so that he makes sure that they get brought to conclusion.
Outstanding. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for your service.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mathias, do you have any
No, ma'am.
comments? Mr. Dodd?
No, nothing else.
Ms. Luke?
Well, I'll just say it fast because it's Teacher Appreciation Week, and I'm feeling especially appreciative to all the people that are doing the extra end-of-the-year things, because there are a lot of end-of-year things. And so just thank you to all of the instructional personnel out there.
Mr. Brandyberg?
Nothing to do.
The only thing I have, Mr. Mock, I guess this is your official last workshop with us. I'd just like to express our gratitude for your hard work, and today was a good example of the rigor of what you do. We are most appreciative, and we will be getting with you at a later time to officially give you a token of our appreciation. That is along with our audit committee, so that'll be forthcoming. Madam Superintendent?
Oh, happy Teacher Appreciation Week.
Mr. Cole?
No, ma'am.
Well, nothing further. The meeting is adjourned.